We have for a roll call, simply state the names as we go through.
Terry Delapaz,
Ashlyn Daris.
Richard Matton.
Fred Massey.
Mike Gerhart.
Jenny Flanagan.
And Jim Leffers.
And before we move ahead, I'd like to welcome Richard. He's one of our recently appointed alternates to the board. Tyler Dixon is not here, so Richard will be sitting in. He will attest to the fact that he has reviewed all of the tapes and the information relevant to these issues before us today. And as such can sit as a member of the planning board. We've gone through this before with other members who have been missing or have missed a meeting, and they simply have to go through that process. So Richard has attested to that. Then do I need Richard to do anything further? Or?
Have to attest to it.
I attest to it.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to welcome Blake James Costa, who is our second alternate. Again, couldn't be more pleased to have both these gentlemen join us. The structure of our board is such that we do have two alternates to fit in when one of our members cannot make it. And the fact that they're both here today speaks volumes to their commitment already to the planning board. So welcome and thank you to both of you. Our first order of business, we do have a quorum. Do I need to say any more about that? I think we're okay. We have 2 minutes to approve. The April 8th, which was a special meeting relative to the comprehensive plan presentation to the town council. And you all received that. Are there any questions or concerns regarding that?
The only question I have is I did not attend the meeting, but I did listen in, so
You can vote on it.
I can vote, okay.
It's confidence that it's accurate.
All right, and so Jenny attests as well. So all in favor of accepting the minutes for 8/20,
I will motion to
Motion.
accept the minutes.
and I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And now the April 22nd, 2024 minutes, which was the regularly scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board. Any questions or concerns regarding those minutes?
Motion to approve.
All right, second, Terry, you'll pause, all in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain. I didn't.
I'm sorry.
I said I'll abstain. I didn't watch and wasn't here.
Oh, okay. I had one abstention. That's Ashley. We do, by the way, have a stenographer for this meeting. Cindy, thank you very much for coming on board. And our first order of business is 10 Liberty Street Partners, LLC. This is the preliminary plan for a 20-unit owner-occupied condominium housing development, including 5 affordable units. This is a continuation of this application. It was continued from our last meeting. This is a public hearing. We will have the applicant do the presentation. We will then open it to a public hearing for comment. And at that point, the board will then discuss what has been said and move with a decision of some sort, depending on how it all plays out. So, Bruce?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Attorney Bruce Cox here on behalf of Liberty Street Partners. A submission was made back in February, I believe it was, to the board through your planner, and you've had all that. I submitted in my submission, elements of the submission, the assessment and redressing the documentation and such of the condominium documents and of the development documents. The condominium documents had previously been submitted. That which I submitted with the preliminary simply had the highlights addressing the concerns of the board, such as the snow removal will be part of the condominium dock, such as the parking will be assigned within the condominium docks, and such. Furthermore, the assessor, or excuse me, the planner had called out in his concerns question about access to the buildings. We've said repeatedly that knock boxes will be on both buildings and keys provided to the fire and police department for readily available access. We have addressed the streetscape, and it has been addressed now in the planner's recommendation. He understands that unfortunately, the linden trees will have to be removed to allow for radius turning, as has been discussed myriad times before this board and the TRCs. The submission by Liberty Street Partners addresses the exercise and comments that Mr. Lannon has done with the tree commissioner here in town. The fact that he will be providing 4 linden trees, 3 on site that are of a larger caliber than are required, and a 4th wherever the town wants it. So that will address the streetscape. In terms of the fire safety and such, obviously he's going to be fully compliant. The building official will in fact be apprised and provided all of the documentation relative to that. In terms of water supply, we've already demonstrated that there's 60 pounds of pressure in Liberty Street, and that's through the submission by Bristol County Water Authority. There seems to be some confusion or uncertainty on the part of the planner as it relates to sprinkling of the buildings and the need for water, a booster pump. If one is needed, one will be provided, but that information cannot be deduced at this point in time until the building is designed as approved, and then the calculations are made by the fire suppressant company. They say, this is what we need. Then Bristol County Water Authority and says, here's what we can provide. And if anybody says we need a booster pump, it will be had. It's very simple, but we cannot give that information. At this time, it's virtually impossible. Similarly, the waste disposal is addressed in the condominium docks, and it's on the plans as have been provided by Principi Engineering. And those spots will be developed in accordance with, as requested by the planner, an elevated pad and enclosures. So those issues are done. The concrete sidewalk will be addressed, obviously, in the development. We've already committed to that. The planner, in his commentary, questioned the paving and such. Well, obviously, that will be complied with. The site is literally a self-contained site. It is all private property from the street edge in, but any paving cuts that will be done into the street will be done and returned in accordance with the paving requirements of the town. There is no need for any construction easements because, as I said, it is a self-contained site. It's not one that needs additional easements from other entities and such. In terms of engineering development, we have Mr. Principi here this evening. When this was originally developed, we believe we were going to be going for a master preliminary presentation, and all the engineering has been done for water issues on site, recognizing that it is a completely impervious site at this time. Being completely impervious, our obligation is to not make it worse. We're going to make it immensely better. The original building in the back of the site was considerably larger. It's been reduced by some 30%. That reduction has not been addressed in the drainage. The same drainage system that was going to be placed in the site for the original building, the original new building, is going to be used. It's not going to be re-engineered. It's less expensive, candidly, to put in the existing one. Furthermore, Mr. Lannon does this for a living. He knows how to do it, and it will be done in compliance with and supervised, obviously, by the town's engineer. So from a drainage perspective, we are enhancing the site enormously. No tax credits will be sought because they're not financially feasible, sensible to do. You're chasing pennies with dollars of exercise, and the Liberty is not interested in doing that. Mr. Lannon will address how he's going to fabricate and address the architectural features of the back building. He's been working with Cordy Dawson, a noted historic architect, and he knows exactly what we have to do, and that's the commitment he is going to make to this town and this board. So he will be addressing that at later in this evening. But I do point out that one of the policies that is present in the town's proposed comprehensive plan is that the PHC 5 prioritizes the incentive and adaptive reuse and the restoration of historic buildings and prevention of demolition by neglect. Demolition by neglect is exactly what's happening at Liberty Street School right now. By all the prior owners, nobody's taking care of this building. These gentlemen are going to take care of this building. The only way to feasibly do that is by having the additional structure in the back. That's been part of their presentation right along. Lighting and such, the ideal lighting fixtures, as has been requested by the planner, will be addressed in the final stage. And I want to go through his report in a few moments. The site has already been determined by this board, by its approval of the master plan, to fit within the neighborhood. I have with us this evening Mr. Pimentel, who in his report, and I will be submitting that momentarily, that were this in R6 zone. It's a VB, but it's surrounded by R6. The site could contain 16 to 18 units without a single affordable. It could contain 16 to 18 units without an affordable. We have 5 affordables. We also have something that nobody's made a comment about. One of our units is fully ADA compliant. It's not required in the town regulations. It's not required anywhere, but it's part of what I encourage my clients to do, and my clients were considered enough to do that. It's something that you rarely find in a community such as Warren or many communities. We have, as previously submitted, all the affordable housing information required. We've had the approval of the recommendation of the coordinator for that already. Going to the planner's recommendations this evening. Much of what he talks about, listen, in the beginning portion of his commentary, I equivocate, say is equal to spelling errors or corrections, because he's saying they need to be talking about the town engineer versus, rather, a town building official versus a town engineer, because you don't have a town engineer. We will obtain proper sign-offs when we get the applications before the appropriate people. When we have the green light from this board to build these buildings, and then the designs are finalized. You don't do that now. You do that when you know the building you're going to build. Because, for instance, in the school, we are putting 8 units in there, one of which is affordable. And in there, we intend to sprinkle the building. That will require engineering in terms of the analysis of where the apartments are, where the sprinklers are, and whether or not there's going to be a need of a booster pump. I'm now at page 4, the commentary about a Storts connection. We've committed previously to the idea that these buildings will have Storts connections or fire hookups for the fire department in the location the fire chief wants. Whatever configuration, whatever type of setup or attachment he wants will be there. Furthermore, the bollards protecting it will be coated or protected in the manner which the fire chief wants. But that's, once again, when we get to final. These are the little details. We're dealing with the big details now. In terms of the elevations and floor plans, he was commenting about the conflict in terms of which unit is which. When the designs were originally made, I commented which units are which. I am involved in a condominium complex, which is very simply laid out. All units are 3 digits. First floor units start with a 1, then a 0, and then left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Second floor units start with a 2, then a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Third floor units start with a 3, and that way, so on and so forth. When someone's told they're in unit 307, anybody, rescue and likewise, can go and say, 307, third floor, 7th unit, let's go. I'm going to suggest that our plans will be modified to reflect that so that they're not units 1, 7, 8, 9, and having to chase around the building for it. That will simplify the elevation and the plans very easily. Again, lighting information should be a final matter, not a preliminary plan approval. 0 or dark sky lighting is perhaps a condition that should be put on your approval. But the idea that we identify the light fixture and the light bulb, you don't want to be reading about that. That is appropriate for final plan approval. In terms of the former school window replacement, there are existing windows there. Mr. Lennon will be addressing that, as well as addressing how the back building will be complementary to the existing structure. On page 6 in the landscape plan, he acknowledges that we have to remove the westernmost linden tree. We have a question about the signed and filed decision, which says that the linden tree shall stay, which is contrary to what I believe the motion was. We also have a question about the number of 3-bedroom units being 0 or being reduced, as was in the verbal motion and is reflected in the minutes of the board, as opposed to the recorded decision. His recommendation in terms of the finding are appropriate. These are on his page 7 of his recommendation. And those recommendations are as required, as your solicitor will advise you. We are asking for a minor variance on the coverage. We're at 30% versus, we're at 31.9% versus 30%. The use of the variances are addressed in Mr. Pimentel's reports on pages 14 and 19 of his report. Actually, 10 and 14 of his 19-page report, which I'll submit to you in a moment. It's the hydraulics. And with that, I'm going to introduce some people, if I may. First, I have Mr. Edward Pimentel and a report that I would like to submit to the board, and I have your copies here. I believe you're all familiar with Mr. Pimentel and his credentials. Thank you. Mr. Pimentel's testimony should be relatively limited this evening, but he has several issues, some issues that are pertinent. Mr. Pimentel. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean.
And do people I don't, no, they don't swear. Anyways, for the record, anyway, Edward Pimentel, that's P as in Paul, Imentel. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's kind of a unique situation because typically I'm presenting before the board at the master plan stage, right? So that's where we're describing the project, getting input from the board, putting forth a development that kind of lays out conceptually what we propose to do. We're addressing comprehensive plan consistency so that then we can feel confident that the board allows us to proceed accordingly to the engineering stage, establishing an appropriate density, a general layout and design, where the facilities are going, those types of things. Obviously, that's already been all accomplished, but council reached out to me out of an abundance of caution. But because we are protecting a record, I just wanted to read into the record real quickly where we are in regards to the Rhode Island general law. So pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 45-23-40, subsection G1, when it goes into master plans, it says that a master plan vesting includes the zoning requirements. That's why we submit what used to be called, well, what we do call a list of waivers here. Under the new law, it's called a list of adjustments. Council has already just noted those. It also vests the conceptual layout. We're at the prelim. That's why council just got into in-depth more the engineering. And then all the conditions shown on the approved master plan drawing supporting materials. That's why council went through those conditions and how we've addressed them. So those have all vested. But like I said, I have an abundance of caution. They want to be put a little bit of information on the record. I went through that comprehensive plan again, read it cover to cover, just like I did with Croad. There were some unique things now in regards to this development that obviously were different from that development. Most notably is the presence of the historical Liberty Street School. Following up on that, I went and read the analysis that was done by Roger Williams several years ago in regards to Liberty Street, because the point being is, having been a planner who worked with historic districts and ran the historic district that worked for myself, it was obvious to me that we also had to pay careful attention to that, which I'm sure they had. I read the minutes like Mr. Richard did to get caught up, reviewed everything. And what was interesting and imperative in that analysis was the key features. And those were the exterior features of the brown stone facade and the cupola. They had to be protected, the integrity. And that is what Mr. Lanny and his partner are going to absolutely do at great expense. And the reason why that's so important is because when we talk about an affordable housing development, we're also talking about the fiscal, the economic viability of the project. When you do a market rate project, you're going to sell those units or rent those units at what the market allows you to do. You're going to max out. That doesn't happen with an affordable housing development because you have to introduce the affordable units in a like-kind manner. You can't distinguish. That's the whole point of affordable housing, is we're trying to accommodate our police officers and our school teachers and everything and not treat them any differently from any other person. So that was key in my report, the economic feasibility of the project, why we need this other facility. Obviously, this board and the applicant have worked aggressively. That's the whole point of the master plan, is the negotiation process. We initially started with 25 units. We reduced it by 20% down to 20 units. In so doing, we relocated one of the units from the back to the front because that was going to be a 7, now it's 8. And we were able to reduce the massing and the scale by almost upwards of 33% of that building. And as council's already said, we didn't change anything else. We're still going to introduce the pervious landscape service that we're going to do and the drainage system. These are vast improvements that don't exist now. There is no drainage controls on this site right now. It's almost limitless in landscaping. It's all things you capture through redevelopment, but they also play into the economic viability of a project when we're talking about an affordable housing comprehensive permit. That all went into my conclusions that I can understand why this process has reached the point it has. I can understand the negotiations that are going on, why we're at 20 units. It works financially. It's better for the project. It reduced the massing and scale and the impact on the neighborhood. And for that reason, I believe it's very consistent with your comprehensive plan and meets the respective standards for the granting of the affordable housing development. I did a quick little analysis, I don't have to get into it, of what the viability of the property could be under the current zoning and under the surrounding zoning. And if you think about, I don't believe the project would be very oriented for village business because the historical structure has limitations. If you introduce business, you've got to render it handicap accessible. Every office use, every doctor's office has to be, you start to affect the historical integrity of a structure. So that makes it very problematic from a commercial perspective. If you're going to add businesses in another building, the interaction with traffic is much more than residential. When you balance all these things out, residential usage of this property is most appropriate. And that's why I did an analysis. What would be more conducive for this property and be in character would be the surrounding residential 6. And Mr. Cox has already noted what I had in my report. So for that, like I said, for all those reasons, I felt the development is very appropriate. Now, if the board has any questions.
No, I think we'll wait until there's anything further in terms of.
Certainly. Mr. Chair, I would ask that what he just handed into the board is a resume and a plot be entered as part of the record.
Make a motion to accept, Mr. Pimentel's, who I believe has already been accepted as an expert
Yeah,
witness
just wanna make sure
previously.
that this is part of the record, so the public.
So moved.
Okay, second,
Second.
Richard, all in favor?
Aye.
Now, as I said previously, we first believed this was going to be a master / preliminary type application combined way back when. Normally, you wouldn't have done all the engineering that's been done on this site until now. But in order to preserve the record, and because a lot of this was in the record at master, we're going to repeat a little bit here with Mr. Tom Principe of Principal Engineering here this evening. He's going to address his calculations and the presentation of the site for this board. Mr. Principe.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Principe, Principe Engineering Company, registered professional engineer here in the state of Rhode Island. Again, just to kind of reiterate a little bit about what council had indicated this evening. We were before this board, or myself personally was before this board, giving a very technical engineering presentation. I don't want to be too redundant with the board tonight, so I'm just going to kind of breeze through some of the engineering we have already presented tonight, and at the end, I'm happy to come back up and answer some questions.
Excuse me. Is there anything new being presented to me tonight? I
This
mean,
is technically, as Mr. Cox stated, this is a unique application as it started in the old law and now the new law, right? So now we no longer have a master plan. So we may see some repeat information, but certainly this is the preliminary plan. There's fine detail. This is where you get all the engineering, et cetera, and that's what the applicant is, I believe, presenting tonight. It's the fine detail in the application.
And while it was presented in master, it was presented at that time, and that record is not necessarily per se part of the preliminary. So Mr. Principe has promised to be expedient and such. We do have opponents here with counter issues, so I want to make sure the record is clear at this point, in case we have to go forward more.
Well, we are, as we know, this matter is in litigation. And so we are, this is, again, one of the reasons why we have the stenographer here is that we want to ensure that the record is clear and, due to the change in the legislation, we absolutely, we have to go through this. I mean, this is repetitive for us
Sure.
in a way that's,
And a little bit for us, again,
but again,
I want to be too
you know,
redundant with the board. I'm just
we
trying to be
understand.
transparent. So again, I'll kind of breeze through the engineering side of things. Not much has changed, but again, just to kind of go back to what was stated before previously, again, we know Liberty Street School, the entire parcel right now is currently paved. So again, from an engineering standpoint of view, I'm going to get into the drainage question. So again, it's currently paved. We have an existing building. We're proposing a new building in the rear portion of Liberty Street. Again, as it was stated this evening, we have an 8-unit for Liberty Street and proposed 12-unit building towards the rear. We have parking, we have fire service, water, sewer, underground electric, and gas. All those utilities have already been designed. They are on the plan that is above on the screen right now that has been submitted for the record. We've already, again, reached out to Bristol County Water, the sewer department. We have plenty of pressure, water flow. So utilities itself are connecting for the proposed project. From an engineering standpoint of view, we have no issues. Again, as far as the drainage is concerned, it's important to note with this project, there will be a decrease in the runoff rate right now. Currently, right now, it's called uncontrolled. So right now when it rains, last week when we had that heavy rainstorm, right now the water flows off the roof onto the parking lot and into the neighbor's property. With this project, again, we are going to mitigate that runoff. We're going to capture the runoff from the roof, the new roof, and some of the parking into an underground detention system, which has already been engineered. It's on the engineering plan for the record. We did the soil testing. Those results of the soil testing is on the plan itself. It actually, surprisingly, again, we run into tough soils lately. This site was very, very dry, deep water table and gravelly, loomy, sandy soils that are very porous that can absorb a lot of water. So to me, that was actually highly beneficial as an engineer. So I was very, very happy about that because then we can actually accept more runoff into this underground system and we can build a deeper one that has more storage capacity. So I don't have any limitations as far as the drainage is concerned. And that is on the engineered plans that we have. It's in between, it's an underground system. You can see in between those little squares, they're in between the two buildings, Liberty Street School and the proposed building in the rear. Those are storm tech systems. They're little chambers that sit under the ground and you can drive over them. They're H20. So you actually don't even see them. And a lot of these parking lots at Stop and Shop and these bigger parking lots you see, that's what they have. The drainage mitigation is underground. So you don't see it on a site like this. We don't have a ton of room. And we were able to put it underground. The soils allowed us to do that. So from an engineering standpoint of view, we didn't have any limitations on that. Again, the utilities, all that worked out with the sizing and availability. We talked about circulation and the parking requirements. Again, we're providing ample parking for the state requirement itself of 1.5 parking spaces to 1 unit. I know the requirement now has changed. That's why we're here, where it's all you need is 1 parking space to 1 unit. We do exceed that. The circulation, we do have 2 means of egress that we reviewed with the fire department. And also we briefly talked about a little bit about a landscape plan. So obviously the site doesn't have any landscaping. So currently right now, we just hatch an area around the south, east, and north side of the proposed building, which we will be proposing some vegetative screening and landscaping subsequent to this application. That's it on my.
Thank you. From your standpoint, I know that one of the comments that had been noted was turning radiuses based on the current parking.
Sure.
And, you know, this has been in Herb's report, he had recommended removing some of the parking to allow for
So yeah, there you go, Herbert. So right now, if you can see the plan up there, I don't know if you can zoom in. So we have dash lines that we analyzed a turning radius for a vehicle. You can see the dash line. If you scroll down a little bit in between the rear portion of Liberty Street building
Yep.
and the front of the proposed building, you can see the dash line curves. If you can see, maybe zoom in a little bit more for the board. So what we did is we analyzed the curb radius coming from, we have the arrows, so we have a one-way in and a one-way out for traffic circulation. It's not big enough for 2-way. And that's what triggered the parallel parking, because again, we need to keep that aisle clear. So right now we have perpendicular parking for the proposed building with a full 24-foot aisle width. And that triggered parallel parking along the property line. Oh, but the turning radiuses were evaluated as a 30-foot turning radius, which is ample for any mid-sized truck or especially a car to turn around. So we made sure that we did not hit any of those parking spaces in that dash line. That's a travel way line. So we did take into the board's consideration and evaluate that on the latest iteration.
Herb, you had indicated that, I mean, that says 20.5, the turning radius, is that?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. If you zoom in a little bit more, it's 20.5 on the aisle width,
I see, so.
but you can't see it
29,
from,
The,
so
okay.
yeah, it's in a very small text.
Right.
30
and gray
point.
text.
If I could approach, I could show you on my,
Yeah, I mean, I can see it there.
okay, all right.
Yeah, it
Those
shows.
are 2 different numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that, Herb?
Sorry, just didn't know if you were taking comments while they're doing their presentation.
Yeah, no, I was, because it was part of the engineering design.
Basically, from my standpoint, the handicap spot is somewhat problematic. One, because of the landscaping on the east side. You have a fence corner right behind that particular spot that's incidental with the total width of the handicap spot. And therefore, I think that there's some turning movement there, especially if you're a handicapped individual. I think that space can go away and you make the one next to it, where there's actually a big 24, make that the handicap spot. Down in the, down below, I think that you could get rid of, parking spots 17 and 18, again, because of the maneuverability of cars getting in and out of there. 17 being the most, southwesterly, and 18 being the most southerly parking spots. And I think that that just frees up things, and you're still in excess of the statute that's 1.0.
Yep.
It still is close to the 1.5 that they've proposed. So I don't think overall it impacts the number of parking spots that they're proposing. But in general, I'm still nervous about all of the parking along the western side, but that's been, I think that they've talked about that at length in terms of the length of the parking spots that they're putting in, the radius that Mr. Principe's talked about. It will be an issue that will have to be monitored by the owner and then ultimately the condominium association to ensure there's no parking obstruction, probably especially during the winter time frame when if a plow comes through, they want to make sure to clear up the piles that they initially leave. But that's going to be a condominium association issue.
Okay, again, I think it's a matter of, those spots within that area. I don't think
It's not a problem.
it's a make or break. And it's, as we've noted before, the parallel parking there is going to be a problem, but as Bruce said, this is part of the condo docs that puts the onus on the owners of these units. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next.
In terms of the parking, so the board understands, with the new configuration, the greatly reduced building and those added spots we have there on the western end, and the west, by the way, happens to be the left end of the building. We have all but 2 of the units being able to have a direct pull and assigned spots. So they will not have to have parallel parking. So parallel parking will be an option that can be exercised by visitors and that sort of thing. As we all know, if you park in front of the town hall here, you have parallel parked in an extremely narrow spot because the main road is so narrow and people do it every day of the year. So that issue is, I believe, fully manageable. The idea of relocating the handicap spot, if that's what the board feels is appropriate, certainly that's not insurmountable by a long shot. That's an easy fix. Now I have Mr. John Lannon, who is the developer, coming up to address how we're going to complement the historic building that they're now in the process of preserving, including the cupola and such. Mr. Lannon. John, you're on deck.
Good evening. Good to see you all again. I'll be brief.
You need to identify yourself with us for now.
I'm sorry, John Lannon. I'm one of the partners. I got my hearing aids on. Did you ask me to state my name? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not hearing. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
John Lannon. I'm one of the Liberty Street partners. Apologies. I'll be brief. Herb's report, I read what he's recommending here. I'd like to speak to the fire radius really quick. After 5 TRCs, we made the radius required by the fire department. It fits. We hope we never see a fire truck. Certainly rescues will fly in and out of there if they need be. We don't want them either. But we met the standard. You can instruct us to remove some parking spots if you so choose. We made it that 1.5. That was a big deal a few months ago. We'd like to hold that. We'd like to assign 1 spot to each unit, and then the other ones would be first come, first serve. We do promise to show everybody that there's some parallel parking involved. I have a CDL, so it doesn't bother me to parallel park, but that's that's an advantage. We'd like to keep the 1.5. I don't agree with Herb that the ADA is in any way impeded by the way we designed it. That's the landing area for a wheelchair, which would then egress onto the sidewalk. So I'll look at it again, but I don't see the problem. So the only other items were the parking spots. So we don't agree that any of the radiuses are problematic. The code items, anything that was listed in here You've got paid experts in town. You got a fire chief, building inspector, chief of police. Let them tell us what they want for a fire department connection. I'm in the water. I do all the water company's work. Whatever you guys want. My son just made battalion chief in Providence. We're not gonna give you any short. You want a fire hydrant, we'll throw that in. I have no problem with any of that. All right. The benches were brought up and the bike racks, they are in here, but I think the landscape architect missed those. I'm glad you picked it up. We do like the bike rack on one side. We showed it initially, and there's some park benches, sunlit. It would be the north west corner would be the bench of the existing building, and the northeast corner would be the bike racks, more of a shaded area. I don't know if that was a big deal, but you've got them. So as far as the what you left us with, you asked us to revisit the 3-bedroom units as we were leaving. One of your last things, I think it was your words, Fred. So what I did was I took the 6 that we had proposed. We took 2 of them, made them back to 2-bedroom units, but I held the two that we had as affordable. I held them as affordable. So there's only 4 3-bedroom units now, but 2 out of the 4 will be affordable ones. It's going to give us a little more balance. We reduced the 1-bedroom units. So we've got a little bit of each now. We did take a hit. We took a whole column of apartments out. That was a little bit of a give back. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I think that whole community will walk onto your sidewalks and still go to your shops like we first said. But if that's okay, that's what we did. You'll see the new plans in your package. I just took 2 of the 3-bedroom units and I made them back into 2s. So it's a 33%.
You know, again, I think one of the concern about the 3 bedrooms was.
You asked us to look at it.
Yeah, no, and it was, for the record, the reason that, I think, the concerns that I have voiced and were also voiced in the staff recommendation were that, this was designed to be for young professionals, couples.
Yes.
Not families, and that the 3-bedroom could conceivably be used for that. And then the other concern was that the bedrooms were tiny in the 3-bedroom.
We did adjust those out if you look at it a little bit closer, but on top, it's ironic that now that we're in the new year, and we've talked about this a lot, I guess we're not allowed to talk about what units, the composition of units anymore. I just read that in the newspaper. It's nothing to do with us, but we can't decide 3s, 2s, and 1s. We're just supposed to talk about a development now, I guess. And I know the rules are changing every minute, but that's not supposed to be a consideration, I guess, anymore. That's what I was just told on another project.
Okay,
So, but that said, we did make a good faith effort. Like
yeah, no, I agree.
it's been a year now. We know we've been saying yes, and we're still continuing to say yes. It's unfortunate we're where we are right now, but this happened kind of quickly. Cordy Dawson couldn't make it. She is well known as a historic architect. She does a lot of work in Bristol, on the parade route, and often Bradford, all the areas. She just wanted to meet up, or I can just read this in if I'm allowed to, or I'll read it in my own words. Is that okay, Ben?
You can read it, but then just submit it to the board, be part of the record.
All right. Let me just turn it into my own words because it's part of a larger
You
review.
can, just
All right.
submit whatever sheet you have to submit written. Sure.
Right, the new addition should be distinguishable from the historic building, but the building materials should be harmonious, although not exactly the same. You have achieved many of your other goals outlined in the brief, making the addition visually distinguishable from the existing and unobtrusive in design, taking cues from the existing building, locating the addition so it is not highly visible from the public right of way, making the new building subordinate in size and design to the historic building. That's what Cordy had to say. It's her design. She's in and out of there all the time. That we brought her on board. She's a premium architect. So that was just her words, and I was allowed to read them in.
Yeah, did you, have you adjusted the second building, you know, in terms of there was a brick facade,
Yes, it's all off. It's all the clapboards.
Okay.
We've submitted some windows. We have others. You did want to talk about windows a little bit. I have what we submitted to you in the package. If there's something else to be talked about, I have a couple of other.
Okay, so you met the requests.
So the windows that we have now are pretty much as shown. They are a vinyl clad window, but they do have the lights, the grills in them, and they're built in. And you're looking at them, you're not really going to see the difference. You will up close, but if you want to go poke it in someone's window, the windows, I guess, at the existing school are aluminum clad with wood, And I guess they were recently put in, or something like that is, doable if that's something you prefer. We're trying not to match exactly with what is there, but it's an option if you had another option. So we're flexible with the windows. The siding is not a vinyl, it is a composite, but it's being used a lot, lately, and we submitted that to you as well.
Okay.
I'll wait. I know there's probably some people that want to speak. If there's an answer to be had, maybe I'll get up after.
A couple of quick things, the trees, Herb and I both noted that, that if you put the trees where the old trees were, you're gonna run into the same problems with the power lines, so you wanna be.
You had me meet with Chuck State, and I just forgot to mention it. I
Okay.
did meet with Chuck. He brought it to his entire committee. He did have a couple of requests, which I put him in there. He wants to supervise all the plantings. He asked for a larger caliper tree, linden tree. There are 3. We did reach out, not to bring up the people next door ever again, but I did reach out to them and offer them a 4th one on their property. They have yet to get back to me, but just like the land we were trying to buy, I just don't want to keep bugging them, but we did reach out. But the nice 3 they planted in the islands, and Chuck Staten will supervise all of it, and they were happy with that.
Okay, again, that we want to make sure that we're not putting trees in that are gonna be truncated, because of the lines.
I guess those are a pretty big deal.
Moving those,
So
so,
I understand.
Great. okay.
All right. If you have anything else, if not, I'm sitting right here. I can get up later on.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
I
But I
think
thought
we'll
I'd be
open
brief.
it, for public comment at this point.
Or do you want?
Bruce is all done with the presentation.
I don't know, does anybody from the board, or do you want to?
I'm gonna borrow one of the comments from your consultant. The consultant, I think architectural consultant,
Yeah.
said the building was subordinate in size.
Yes,
I'm borrowing your word, subordinate.
it's 4 feet
I
one
think,
way.
I think in one of our earlier meetings, now you can correct me if I'm wrong,
Sorry, yeah.
maybe February, I'm not sure which. But I did the math, and this building is still 11% larger footprint
Footprint wise,
than the 4 building.
That's possible.
Can you correct me if I'm wrong? If that's math. is
I don't have it in front of me. You could be right. I think dimensionally, if from memory, it was 2 feet shorter, 4 feet longer.
Well, my math showed it was 11% larger footprint. That's not subordinate.
So, the square footage,
Footprint.
but the footprint is maybe not subordinate, but the building may be.
I don't know what your definition of subordinate is,
I don't know.
but I'm quoting your word.
Right, which I was unfortunately reading from a historic.
And my other comment is that as best you can, if this goes forward, electrify at least 2 spots for a level 2 EV charger.
That was brought up, yes.
Bring in the wiring, leave the homeowners association to decide who they want to contract with as far as which particular type of charger, but it needs a 220, 240
Yes, it was.
wiring done. I would recommend at least 2 spots.
Yes, absolutely. And we can enter that. Absolutely.
Okay. But anybody can correct me with my math if I'm wrong. Anybody? Please correct me.
Yeah, I'm not, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's not subordinate if it's the footprint's larger, but visually subordinate, I think, is what she was referring to from the street. If you
Again,
look
this is the Department of the Interior guidelines and recommendations was brought forward to us
Right.
that even the footprint should be smaller than the building in front.
Okay. You good? Anything else for me?
Yeah.
So, first I'll say I was not on the board when you first came in here, but I was in the audience for all the meetings. So, and I've read all the minutes and everything like that. So, I have 3 questions. One, I'm glad that Herb pointed out about the handicap parking space. The space itself seems to be wonderful. I think I drive pretty well, but I think I would have a hard time backing out, having that property corner landscaping right by my backing out.
Which location?
This is the handicap parking space. I think it's in the other direction, Herb.
Yep.
Yep.
There it is. And then if you could zero in on it. Up with that.
Yep. He's got
It
it.
doesn't appear to line up with the fence.
It lines up with the fence and.
You worried about somebody drifting a little bit?
So, well, and Herb's recommendation would be to drop the
I'm
space
not
next to
ag-
it.
I'm not against eliminating a parking
Right.
space, just in general. I think Fred was here for the past year. The most complaints we had, the most worries, the most concerns were parking. You want to pull a spot, it's okay.
Well, and I don't know whether it's pulling the spot or putting it someplace else. I want it to be recognized that that would be, if you're gonna put a handicap parking place, don't put it in the very edge of the site where there's other features that make it difficult for backing out again.
We can look at it.
Yeah. The second issue that I had was on the street where you are doing sidewalk restoration. And you referenced the curb coming back with with concrete curbing. Herb's got it up there. I would love to see you coming back with either bluestone curbing, if you can recycle it from the street, or granite. Bluestone would be the preference, recycled from the street, or at a minimum granite.
All right, but so unfortunately, it was never brought up at TRC. It kind of popped up at one of, and Herb catches a lot, so hats off to Herb, but DPW never even asked us. So we drew something that didn't exist, and we could certainly, I mean, it's what I do for a
Well, I
living.
think there's bluestone in front of there right now.
So everything's buried. If you've been out there, basically the road has been paved so many times, or the sidewalk, and it, you know how it kind of
Yeah.
just melts in. I believe there is slate
Okay,
underneath it. The condition of that slate could be all
Yeah.
splintered though.
right, so Herb's calling that
Yeah,
out
you can
there.
see there's not much of it. If you,
It's not, well, it's been buried over the years by, this.
do you have a preference to save that?
But that's the bluestone.
I would have no problem trying to save that.
Excellent, okay. And then the third question I had, and this is a conceptual question, and I don't know if it's an issue or not. The requirement that the affordable units be integrated throughout the project, which is wonderful, and you've done a fantastic job about that. My concern is about the one affordable unit that's in the school building,
Yes,
which is in the basement.
right.
And so, you know, as a basement unit, it's a highly undesirable unit. You know, your windows are only half height, you're always looking up.
Okay.
Um,
Good point. I can explain what happens. So basically, it's what they call a garden level. It's like a raised ranch. So you have a half concrete wall and then a half structural wall. We have 14, almost 14 and a half foot ceilings in the school. We didn't build it. It was what they did back in the day. In talking with the architect and even our electrician and HVAC people and stuff like that, there's, quite frankly, there's going to be some heating bills with those high ceiling units. We thought we could still offer one up front, efficient. They'd have another staircase to get into, maybe egress. It'll all be dressed up. It's like the bottom half of a raised ranch. It's not really the basement. And I was remiss if I just might add one more thing. There was a question as to what we were doing with the rest of the basement that came up in Herb's. It's supposed to be for individual storage for the owners, but we haven't been able to delineate where the storage lockers would be because there's some structural walls. We need to get a structural engineer in there, not to interrupt.
Plus, you
you.
don't have the stairs on the basement.
Right,
plan.
right. We don't have everything done yet. There's no more living proposed on it. I think that's what everybody wanted to hear.
Well, you do, on this plan, you do have the affordable unit. I'm looking at the elevation that shows the affordable unit with the, you know, the relatively, I'm just putting it out there as an observation
No, it
that
is.
I'm uncomfortable.
I like that unit. That's the sun drenched one, quite frankly. And I was saying to well, it'd be kind of easy. It's
In-
5
in
steps
the
and one on the side. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not quite a full basement. So, I mean, if you look at all the windows and everything, that's the southern rotation of the sun. I'll be honest with
That
you.
helps.
It's going to be sun drenched. I think it's going to be a nice spot.
Okay.
So,
I've got a question. There gonna be any handicap accessible accommodations on the original school?
no, those are all granite steps in concrete and they're massive. And it's just, it would just be, not to use someone else's word, problematic. So my attorney did let us know right off the bat that it would be a good gesture if we did create an affordable, an ADA unit on the site. Not everybody thinks of that. So we did provide one. We understand people our age might even find that attractive, even though we're able to get around. So we think it might work.
You know, in reading this and in listening, a lot of things that I keep hearing, I think this is where my frustration comes from, is we will, or I think. I don't want to hear from whether it's our own feedback here or somebody else's. I think I want to hear what is the ADA standards for a parking spot, and does an engineer, a traffic engineer, somebody who actually has a professional opinion, tell me is this okay or not? I don't want to think or perceive from anybody. I want to know the facts. Additionally, with the historic preservation, there is a whole lot of, well, I think this should look like that, or I think there are national standards.
Yes.
Please
We-
bring
our
those
engi-
national standards
our-
to me and tell me very clearly, are these legal or are these not? Is this within a standard? Is this within? And so I'm not saying to you, I'm saying to kind of everybody here
It's okay.
that that's what I would really like to hear, because both on the feedback from the TRCs, I see a lot of I think or I believe. If the fire department needs something, you need to do it, right? Like, I don't want to, so that's kind of my frustration, my feedback of, I still don't really have many clear plans because we've gone back and forth so many times. But I really just want to make sure if we're building something and we're building it in a town that it's safe, it's going to be supportive and it's going to be what is necessary, not what we all think should be this or that. And so that's really my feedback.
That's fine.
In a nutshell.
Good question. So we have a professional engineer, Tom Principe, actually is from the area. His dad was from the area. The Principe name is known. He designed all of this and his stamp is on it. He's not going to miss anything. We pay him, to do a good job for us. Like, we might have been part of the concept drawing in pencil and stuff like that. But when Tommy gets in there with his crew, that's all compliant. Those spots are compliant. We actually added the parallel parking, we actually added a lineal foot to each one that needed to be 9x18s. And when we did that front with the greening up, we actually stretched each one an extra foot. So we actually got 10x18s instead. Parallel parking is still a challenge, but we added another foot. We listened and we've tried to do something for every time anyone raised a hand. But those plans are stamp certified. If there's a mistake, it'll be corrected, but everything should work on that plan. One more thing with the drainage, that's the old drainage system for the bigger building. I don't know if Tommy mentioned that, we did not reduce it. We've actually got the larger system rather than redesign it. That's the system for the bigger building and it's staying right there. We'll install that one.
So is this is not the final design, right? Is this a 30%? What is this?
This is our proposed final design. We've reduced the original building by some 33%. So this is our proposed final design. Obviously, this board is authorized, has the power to say, we don't like it, we do like it. But we've already.
But that's just the layout. I'm talking, you haven't designed all the electrical and all that stuff yet, right? Or have you?
What?
The electrical and all.
No. See, those will all be plugs and
Right, so
switches,
this
like those
is
are all
what
done.
I would understand is a 30 or maybe a 60% design.
In other words, for example, the lighting, you don't.
We
don't
gave you an
have
exterior
that-
building
that would
lighting
come
sample.
in
We
at
did not
final.
give you an interior.
So she's
So
saying-
that'll be on
is-
later designs.
I'm sorry.
What she's saying is that, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're showing us, but there's still some details that need to be, that would be brought at final, that would be 100% of what this project will look like.
That is correct. And
So that's, I
Right,
think,
and that's kind of my feedback is when you come back, I want to see those facts. So right now, there's a whole lot of that speculation, but if this is just preliminary for the 15th time, let's get to what is actually going to be there. Because it's hard for me to even know.
This
At the
stage
point.
is the fine details in the plan. I don't want to fool anybody. That's their responsibilities to give those fine details concrete. So if there's any questions, now's the time to ask any clarification.
So this is supposed to be a 90% design this is supposed to be, you're supposed to be all the way through design?
If I may try to clarify your question, as I understand, perhaps you're asking about the interior design of the building. The interior design of the building is only the number of units and where they're located. That's this board's responsibility. The electrical services within the units and the power to the building is part of the building official's obligation. And Mr. Principe's out as an engineer has testified that the systems designed on the exterior to bring those services to the buildings is in place, is ready to go. The engineering is done. But once you come inside the walls of the building, that is not part of this board's authority or purview. That comes to the building official. To get to that level of design, We need to get to what is the building that's going to be built, going to be. It had been a 18-unit building, it's now down to 12. If we've gone through the design process to 90% interior designs and switches and doors and that sort of thing, all that exercise would have been gone, thousands of dollars. And that's not what is required by.
And that's
the
why
whole
I'm
planning
really kind of
process.
confused on what this is actually supposed to be presented.
Right, and so I think our frustration is, I heard a lot of, okay, so we will address that. But if I'm supposed to say if this is okay, I need to know that it is addressed and this is a part of the development plan
that would
going
then-
forward, if that's the case.
The minutia details are what you didn't do in final. Not,
Okay.
that's not a preliminary.
But the parking's an issue, so is there an engineer who designed this parking that can sign off
Mr.
It's right here.
and say that this is a safe ADA approved parking space?
Absolutely. Mr. Prince, we can testify to that right
Yeah,
now.
let me just clarify something.
I'm gonna sit.
Mhm.
So so just to clarify the point on parking, like her recommended, right? So everything is ADA compliant with traffic circulation, ADA compliant. The size of the parking space is oversized. And we put it there specifically just to access the sidewalk. So, I mean, Herb made a good point. I get it. It's about, to give you a dimension, if you back up in there, the corner of the property and the fence is about 6 inches into the parking space, but it's an oversized parking space. Again, it's still compliant, but I think myself and my client are amenable to just maybe moving it to the other side. That's all that takes to do that. It's not that it won't work. It was a suggestion. I don't think it's a bad suggestion. And then he said about eliminating 2 other spots, because now with today's zoning regulations as January, we only need 1 parking location. So he suggested that the other spots on 17 and 18 were not ideal, but they're compliant. So as an engineer, I agree, they're compliant. They're not ideal. And I can discuss with my client, does he want to eliminate them? So, but that you can get in and out of those parking spots safely.
And then if we are talking about this being final, then
Yeah.
what, and I don't know if this is your question or the designer's question, but what is the clapboard siding? What does it look like? What type of windows? Can we, get more details? Like, what are the names of those so that we actually know?
We have the siding submitted to you in that package and a window.
This package?
I have 2 other windows for discussion if that was problematic, or I don't want to overuse that word tonight, but picked it up from Herb when I read this afternoon. You have the siding, which has been accepted in historic districts in the past. And the vinyl window, you can make a decision whether you like it or nay, but you have a whole catalog with you.
Long time ago.
Wasn't in this.
No.
All of this information that I'm showing was in the applicant's submittal.
Yeah.
Months ago.
Maybe months ago, yes, but this has been continued, so you should have been prepared at each of the meetings to be able to review this.
I think the
White
issue
print.
though is that things change and
Right.
it's hard to know what the current proposal is.
Respectfully, you have a limited number of opportunities to review the application. You had an opportunity at pre-app to generally hear what was going to happen. At master plan, you were given generally the overall view of the project with some detail, but not a lot of detail. This particular review at preliminary is the heavy lift. This is the most information that you get with regard to the application. This is when you need to make your decision about this project, period. Then at final plan, if there are some leftover things, or you need to have some stuff come back from that standpoint, you can do that. The applicant frequently will ask that final plan be treated administratively. The new law is administratively. But at this point, if there are things that you wish to see again or have revised or what have you, you can have final plan as a default comes to you. So there is another application that occurs, But this application is the meat of the review. You need to make your decisions tonight.
So.
Or there still is time under the 90-day limit that you have in order to make a decision once the application is deemed complete. That's the basis of the continuations that we had, because the applicant had to agree to that, because basically it holds the clock up when they agree to do the continuance. But technically speaking, you only have 90 days from the time that I deem it complete to render a decision on this application.
So what is the material that's being used for the siding?
So, Ron, it's just a composite material.
This is a composite.
Ron, come on. I'm sorry, this is Ron, my partner. He doesn't enjoy the microphone as much as I do. But he is a master builder with a commercial license. Just-
How you doing? I'm Ron Lauro with Frame Structures. I'm one of the partners. I don't have the material in front of me, but it is a vinyl. It's not vinyl. It's like a composite material. And
Is
it's
it a
like,
wood composite?
what?
A wood
No,
composite?
no, it's composite, meaning like, no, it's not cement board. It's like a plastic.
So resin.
Yes, a resin, yes.
And is this it being displayed on the screen here?
Yes, lap side.
So,
right there.
so there's 5 or 6 different types of, clapper versus lap. Which one is going to be used? This is
It
the
was gonna
question
be-
that I was having a
Yeah,
hard
it's
time.
going to be the clapboard style.
Okay, so the board and batten was put into this. because-
No, it's just part of the.
Part of the catalog.
The
Okay.
catalog.
And so I'm sorry, Herb, I missed it in the package when I read through it 2 months ago. Where on the plans does it specify which of the siding in the package is being applied to the building?
I think at the time you hadn't accepted any of them, so we figured we'd give you what you wanted. That was these 10. We didn't want to pick them up.
I think that's the challenge we're having, Herb, is we've got this big menu in the back, but we don't know which items of that menu are being applied to the plans at the front.
Yes. I think if you look at the building elevations, it identifies that they're going to be using the vinyl composite siding. And then the material product that is being proposed is in the manufacturer's specifications.
Okay. And then the same would be for the windows, that the window on the elevation is specified as the 6/6
Yes,
Yes,
double hung.
double hung simulated divided light. So it would simulate divided light. It wouldn't be just grills between the glass. It would have grills on the outside and then on the inside also. So it looks like it's an actual simulated glass.
So then, this is on page 129 of the PDF, or I assume we're talking about the double hung version on page 129?
yes. And then, but that's those are the points that you want to clarify for tonight, that if that's what you want. I can tell you that my recommendation as a, for instance, is that the historic building you should be doing it with wood and not vinyl composite. As a for instance.
And the
Because
window,
that's been pretty standard with regard to the voluntary historic district committee. They're not big on vinyl. But that's again, my recommendation. You can go with my recommendation. You can go with what the applicant has proposed, or you may find that there's a different product that you would prefer that you can put on the table.
and you are proposing to replace all the windows.
No.
No, you're thinking about the old building. The old building is not being touched. It has
Okay.
brand new,
Okay, so none of the
It has
windows in
brand
the
new-
old
brand
building are
new.
being touched. So
all we're
it's
doing is
just-
interior work and
Okay.
renovating that, not the
except-
outside.
And,
The
and,
new building is what we're talking about.
what about the basement windows in the old building?
The basement windows in the old building are there.
They are there
Yes.
even today, okay.
Yes.
So the Historic District Commission guidelines and regulations are based on existing buildings. A new building does not have to meet those same criteria of no vinyl, no.
You have a limitation, generally speaking, you are very limited in terms of what you can require, as a, for instance, under the umbrella of the historic district area. But because there is a new building that's being proposed in the same property with regard to the existing historic building, you do have a limited level of ability to deal with design control.
Which is where we,
But limited.
which is where we said, okay, we don't want the brick facade, we're
Yes.
looking
We
for.
took the brick out
clapboards
and we did
and-
clapboard all the way.
Right,
Yes.
okay. All right, there were some concerns. I'm assuming you saw the letters from the abutters. One's asking for a wire fence.
Yeah, I
that you
saw
can
that.
see through. Others are asking for a wooden fence that's more in tune with the historic district.
I did get the responses. I did read them. We had Wooden Wire Fence come out. They're the premier fence people in Rhode Island anyway. Long story short, we're rehabbing the fence. First time it was brought up by one of the neighbors. When I told you I would reach out to the neighbors, and as per my meeting with Chuck Staton, we did. We're offering them shrubbery, plantings, and a free consult with our landscape architect for each property owner that's along there. We also just, for review, showed them there was some slots that can be placed in the chain link fence if they were really adamant that they didn't want to see anything that we were doing. It could be on a property by property basis. That made somebody who wrote a letter probably think about chain link fence and maybe thought about having a new one. But what you don't want to do, and I'm in the business, you don't want to switch over to wood or vinyl. It's a different look. You can go for that. You can like it for any number of reasons, but that's a commercial parking lot there. And for the same reasons we talk about parallel parking, the slightest little nick on a vinyl or a wooden fence, it'll be destroyed. That fence is going to be redone by Wood and Wire, all cleaned up, all repainted, restored. Anything that's bent will all be done. In addition, we're offering plantings on the other side for everybody, and those slats, only if you want them.
Okay. If nothing else, I'd like to open it now to the public.
Mr. Chair, yeah, it's a motion to open the public hearing. And after the motion, the first thing is to introduce the letters or emails that the board received and make it a permanent part of the record.
Okay, in accordance with the town solicitor's recommendation, make a motion to accept all the letters and emails that came in relative to this proposal and to open this now as to have those entered into the record and to open this as a public meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Richard, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, if you want to speak, you come up to the microphone, give your name and address, and we'll take it from there.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kelly Morris Salvatore. I'm an attorney with offices in Providence, and I represent Mr. Frank Aldi, who lives at 33 Miller Street. His property is directly adjacent to this property to the south and to the southwest. If we could bring that up, Herb. That's fine, that one. With the, I'd like to have the one with the new building. I think it's one down. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. So on this plan, south is at the bottom and west is to the left. So that whole corner is Mr. Aldi's property. I want to address the conversation about the process in terms of master plan, preliminary plan, and final plan. So I agree with Mr. Pimentel that with master plan, you are vested, the applicant is vested in zoning requirements and conceptual layout. And that's it. I want to be clear that sometimes density is looked at. In fact, you approved 20 units, but you wanted to get rid of all of the 3 bedrooms. Once you get to preliminary plan, that's what we all call heavy, costly, the nuts and bolts of the engineering. So we're here today to talk about engineering. We're also here to talk about the historic preservation of the site. And that is as a a board reviewing a comprehensive permit application, you are acting not only as the town council, the zoning board, but you're also acting as the Historic District Commission. And you essentially need to issue a certificate of appropriateness. So the comments tonight about we don't really know what's being proposed are valid points. This isn't a negotiation or a menu that you check off what you want. The applicant is responsible to provide a plan to you, essentially a final plan. Because at final plan, the preliminary plan requirements have all been satisfied, all the details, except for the interior, Mr. Paz, but all of the outside site design has all been established, including for historic district purposes, materials of the building, the window, the size, all that. And then final is like very minor details. It's not coming back with landscaping as was stated tonight. It's not coming back with other matters as were stated tonight. So I just want you to understand that master plan is highly conceptual, invests in zoning requirements. They gave you an overview. They told you they want 2 buildings. They laid out the parking in a conceptual way. We're here tonight to talk about all of that. And frankly, that this plan, and I've heard a lot of your concerns. We have the same concerns, is 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. It's too much on the site. The other thing I heard from the applicant tonight is what the zoning is today versus what the zoning was pre-January 1st. They filed an application under the law that existed pre-January 1st. Because of that, they were allowed to present any kind of density they wanted. I heard Mr. Cox talk about the fact that this site would be permitted for 16 to 18 units without this comprehensive permit application. I don't know where he's getting that from. That is an inaccurate statement. In fact, if we're going to talk about parking and that you only need 1 car per unit, well, guess what? Post January 1st, the new law says that if they provide 25% of affordable units, which is what they're proposing, they are entitled to at least 5 units an acre. 5 units an acre. This is just over a half an acre. So do the math. They'd be entitled to maybe 3 units on this piece of property. So as you listen to us talk about the site constraints and the concerns that my client has with this property and the concerns that are going to affect public health and safety, I want you to remember that post January 1st, it's at least, and I acknowledge that, but how much more than 5 units an acre? I want you to think about that. So we've listened to a lot. I have a lot of notes. The first thing I wanted to just mention is that I have not seen Mr. Pimentel's report. He talked briefly. I don't know how long the report is. We'd like to be able to respond to that report. This is a public hearing and we're, permitted to obviously respond to anything that's presented by the applicant. So we would like to see a copy of that report and we'd like to have the opportunity to respond to it. I do have 3 experts with me tonight. David D'Amico is a professional engineer. He will talk about site design. I have Doug McLean, who is a certified planner. He will talk about planning issues. And I also have Brent Runyon. He is in the historic preservation business. So all 3 of them will testify tonight. Let's see, sorry, I just have a lot of notes here. And I also want to be clear that Mr. Aldi supports the adaptive reuse of this school building. It's important, I think, not just for Mr. Aldi, but for the neighborhood. But what you're going to hear tonight is the addition of the new building is clearly not subordinate and frankly overwhelms not just from the front of the property, but also for all the neighbors surrounding this property. So you're going to hear a bit about that and that it does not fit into the historic district. Now, regarding integration, someone mentioned integration, and I have the same concerns as you, Ms. Flanagan. So there's 1 2-bedroom unit, it's 777 square feet. There's 1 unit being proposed for the existing building. and 4 in the new building. That is not integration. Furthermore, putting the one unit, the only unit that you're gonna put in the beautiful old building is in the basement. It's smaller, it's got lower ceilings, that was just testified to. That is not architecturally similar and architecturally integrated with the remaining units in that building. And then putting the other units, all of the other units into the other building, you know, are not integrated. It should be half and half, and it should not be. You don't put, the whole thing about integration is that we don't want to stigmatize people who are low and moderate income housing. But what does this project do? It puts the one low and moderate income unit in the basement. That is not appropriate. Just bear with me. I also wanted to talk briefly, and I'm not an expert on this, but it's a question that I think the board should be asking. The dumpsters that are proposed, my math, again, not an expert, but I did a Google formula. They're about 4 cubic feet each. So how much trash and recycling are going to fit into those 2 small units? My calculation, just based on my own experience, is that that might accommodate 8 units. What are you going to do with the other 12 units? So the dumpster issue is a problem. I also believe, and I think maybe our engineer can speak to this, you don't want dumpsters right against a building for pest control. That's unusual. And obviously not just for the residents who live there who deserve, you know, a healthy and safe environment, but also for the neighbors around the lot.
I gotta, you know, I appreciate what you're saying here. I'm concerned about the amount of time.
Mr. Chair, I think the public just generally has to have a reasonable amount of time. And take that into consideration as, although she's an attorney today, she's here part of the public. It's the
Right.
public. And I would say just afford her a reasonable amount of time. And, you know, when you deem it's necessary.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because you're talking about 3 other experts. I mean, I want to, you know,
Well, I think that we're entitled to present our public.
no,
comment to
I'm
you.
not.
And I can't tell you how much, but I can tell you that we've already been here for an hour and a half listening to the applicant's presentation. I can't tell you how long it's going to be. We certainly are respectful of your time. But I do want to get our objections on the record.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just to make clear, the applicant is the applicant. He's here presenting an application for a development. Again, the attorney's acting as an attorney, however, it is in the public opportunity to speak. So when you deem that it's reasonable for her and everybody else in this room to have an opportunity to speak, that's certainly within your control. So when you decide that she's had an ample opportunity, then you can certainly move on.
Yeah, well, how much longer do you think?
For me, maybe 5 minutes.
All right, I'll hold you to that.
I mean,
No,
I will
really,
object, but
We're volunteers here.
No, I
this
respect
is
that.
the first we've heard that your points are well taken.
Mhm.
But it's the first we've heard here, and, you know, we've been on this for almost over a year. And so I want to be fair to the board
Mhm.
as well. There are points here that you've made that are very good, and in fact, I'm feeling at this point that we may need to continue this, because I just don't see how we can, you know, how much testimony we can take.
yeah,
It's good.
right.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's legitimate and it fits
Right.
within what we're doing. But in all fairness, it's got to be shorter, because I also want other people to speak. And I know that you're in the middle of litigation already. I don't know how that plays into.
It doesn't play in it. Certainly she can ask to speak, and it'll be noted that she was given X amount of time as a.
Okay. Yeah, again, we're in unknown waters here. for
Well,
me.
and we're
Okay.
happy to come back if the board doesn't want to be
And I would
here.
actually encourage, if we continue, have the attorney put it in writing, therefore to limit the amount of time that is used to digest what our presentation is, and an opportunity to verbally put things on the record if we do continue this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if we can, let's go with the 5 minutes.
I will do my best, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, because you have already had, like, generally we say like 3 to 5 minutes for public comment here. I mean.
Right, well, I take a different position on that. I respectfully disagree with my brother, but I think that these are important for you to hear. I think you're going to hear from, you know, Mr. Aldi, who's hired me and experts to talk about the issues associated with this application. Those are important for you to hear. And, you know, frankly, I would, on an appeal, if I wasn't given the opportunity to provide you with our comments, there'd be a
No, again,
problem.
that's why, and that's
Right.
what I'm.
And I'm trying to respect your time, and I'm trying to move through as quickly as possible.
All right.
So, so the board issued a master plan decision, and it had certain conditions in it. And one of them was to remove all of the 3-bedroom units. That was so you issued a conditional master plan approval. In that approval, the board said that all 3-bedroom units must be eliminated. They did not do that. Therefore, frankly, the master plan is not valid until they do that. They did not appeal the master plan. So that condition remains that the 3-bedroom units should be eliminated. I also had a question on the linden trees. I had exactly your question, which is we're removing linden trees and then we're putting 3 in instead in the front. They're going to grow to be the same height. We're going to have the same problems. The linden trees are very important to the historic area. I'm not sure how we're eliminating mature historic trees. I talked about dumpsters. You, in your master plan approval, conditional approval, you asked for a traffic study. You asked for levels of service at 3 different intersections. The response to that is, we're not going to provide you that. You were concerned about the levels of service in the neighborhood, but you're not going to see that. That's a condition of master plan approval, and that needs to be submitted so that you can properly evaluate the impact of this development on the surrounding neighborhood. I'm not going to talk about historic issues because my colleague will do that. And then the landscaping. So I heard Mr. Principe say that we'll provide you with landscaping. I saw a 1-page landscaping plan with a very limited plan, but again, it was said, we will provide you with that. When is that going to be? I want to talk about the setbacks. This is a building that they're asking for an increase in height. They're asking for a variance on height. They're asking for a decrease in the setback. They're not putting landscaping in. And then they're saying, oh, we'll use the neighbor's property to screen this building. They have to use their own property to screen the building. This isn't, I mean, they have to meet somewhat of a buffer. They're asking for setback relief, height relief, and they're saying that, an opaque fence is going to shield a 45-foot building. That's not going to happen. And it's going to affect all of the people that surround this building. I'm going to let Mr. D'Amico talk about the parallel parking issue. And again, I agree with some of the members' comments about the fact that you don't really know what the final plan proposal is. You're kind of guessing, you're looking through documents. There's some things they're not even on the plan. I don't think this is right for a decision. And well, again, Mr. D'Amico will speak to this, but we have a major concern about fire access. And I don't think the fire department has really weighed in specifically about an approval for the circulation of fire apparatus or reaching the new building. So with that, in order to respect your time, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to sit down and I am going to ask Mr. D'Amico.
I have a question for you.
Yes, of course.
Can you, from your notes, can you put together a letter to the board?
Yes,
Detailing your comments?
yes. And I'll
we
give a
can
copy to
reply
Mr.
to
Cox.
it On the later date.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarity on that request in that typically that would require some time to prepare that information to the board. So that assumes that there may be a continuance from that. If you folks decide not to do a continuance, such submittal would be moot.
Okay.
And if well, I accepted this document in, this is the first I've seen it. And we're supposed to receive all these documents a week ahead of time. So just putting out even the documents that we received
That's
today.
what the board to decide if
Right.
you see
Yeah.
whether or not the public had ample opportunity.
Right. Mr. D'Amico?
I know you don't qualify experts, but I'm gonna ask Mr. D'Amico just to give, a short summary of his education, background, occupation, and whether or not you've appeared before boards in this type of capacity.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. David D'Amico. I have been in front of this board as an expert in civil engineering. I am with the firm of D'Amico Engineering Technologies with offices at 2080 Middle Spring Avenue in North Providence, and I am a registered engineer in the state of Rhode Island with approximately 39 years of experience in civil engineering, primarily civil engineering, traffic, highway design, and various transportation. Currently, over the past 14 years, I've been doing a lot of mostly site work in my own firm. I also am a on-call engineer for towns in the state. And one of the things I do is peer review. So I'm given a set of plans, planning board will ask me to do a peer review. And essentially that's what I've done here. And I definitely want to, compliment my associate here for really trying to make this work as best as possible. But in my opinion, I'm still on the thought that it's just way over-designed and, not over-designed, overdeveloped.
Just a second, do we need to accept Mr. D'Amico as an expert witness in this?
No, I think you can record his resume and take it for.
Okay, yeah, because we've done that in the past, but,
Yes, sir.
so go right ahead.
Just quickly, could I go to the layout plan, the parking lot layout plan? So just at first, let's start just coming in and, I'm not gonna say anything is wrong here. It's just the design. When I come down here from Johnston and I walk in this neighborhood, I see Revolutionary War and revolutionary, a neighborhood out of the dawn of our country's history. That's what I see. That entrance there is the entrance to a Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, you're not following the sidewalk through there. There's curbing coming in. It's a commercial entrance in a incredibly important neighborhood, in my opinion, in history. And that is the treatment that you're going to go with. I think it's absolutely wrong. You can design something through there that fits the character of the neighborhood and have the same opening requirements that you need to get your fire access in there. So that's my first one in looking at that. The parking spaces, so the parallel parking spaces is the first thing that jumps out to me along a fence. It's along a hard surface, a fence. That's one reason why I think the applicant was smart not to put a nice vinyl fence along there, because people are going to whack it. They're going to hit it. normally our parallel parking are up against curbing. You park up against the curb, you open your door, you don't have a worry unless there's a hydrant there. There are certain, but this is a hard surface. You're not going to, if you have a passenger in there, you're not going to get up tight against that surface because you're not going to be able to get out. That's problematic because that is an important lane to get through with your emergency vehicle to get to that rear building. One of the reasons why you need fire access is because you have a rear building. Other than that, with the existing building, you could fight that fire pretty much from the street. You can't do that with that rear building. You have to get the apparatus in the back, and that poses problems for the emergency vehicles in the fire department. Back to the parallel parking, other than being up, it's unorthodox, other than being up a hard surface, they're also 9 by 19. That to me, I've been doing this type of development. That is a small parking space for parallel. Parallel minimum parking is 9 by 20. All right, it's a totally different action, as everyone knows, to get into a parallel spot than versus a perpendicular. So no matter, all standards, a minimum is 9 by 20. A lot of times, if we can do it, we go to 9 by 22. That gives a lot of room for the larger vehicles, the larger pickups that are out there. These are going to be used by relatively small vehicles to be able to get in and out of there. So that also would reduce the parking along the edge. And I'll just try to move along quickly. There is one of the other things I noticed, we don't see the single family home that's up there. There's a single family home right near the first 3 parking spaces, and that building is about 3 feet off that fence line. So those people are going to be parking right up against that single family home over there in those first 3 parking spaces, which I think is a negative impact to that particular home to have parking that close to your structure. That's something that I think is a safety issue also. One of the, obviously, you've all talked about the parking spaces near the perpendicular. I think that's 15, 16, and 17. You actually have to back out of those spots. The entrance to the perpendicular parking up against on the west side of the building, it's only 22 feet wide. Normally, a 2-way aisle is 24. That one's 22. And the reason why it's 22 to get all the parking along the north side of the building. Backing out, normally, what you see there where the handicap parking spaces are, it's 20 feet to the building corner. Okay, normally when we have perpendicular parking, we have a 24-foot aisle behind us, so we can easily get out without allowing us a lot of margin of error. Okay, we have less than 20 feet in several of those parking spots. They're going to be hitting that building. They're going to be backing right up into that building. That may not be the planning board's issue, but that's something that I would try to avoid. ADA, if you have 25 spots or more, you need 2 ADA spots. There's only 1 ADA spot that I've seen. And so I would ask to look that up and double check, because I believe there should be 2 ADA spots. And then, of course, one of the big things is for the National Fire Protection Association, something that, the fire marshal needs to look at. And that's NFPA Code 1, Chapter 18, Fire Department access for unobstructed widths of not less than 20 feet. Okay, I do this all over the state. I have to have 20 feet of unobstructed access. There is not. The first stairway you hit is 15 feet, and that's up against parallel parking. Now, if somebody it doesn't want to get up against that fence, I think it's a safety issue and very problematic for getting the E1 apparatus through there. So that's I believe that the only authority that can reduce that is the authority of having jurisdiction, and your fire chief can reduce that. The NFPA does allow him to reduce that. And I would find that unusual for a fire chief to do. And then just lastly, I did look at, just saying with the traffic information, it didn't look like there was a statement in there on traffic, but it certainly didn't follow what you were looking for in your conditions. So there's definitely quantitative work that needs to be done and calculations for what you asked for. And I didn't see that. So, and then just quickly with the drainage, though the engineer said that the drainage, pavement, I didn't see catch basins in there. I only saw one line of drain coming from the new roof. I didn't see any drain lines coming from the old building in there. So that's something that you might want to look. The plans may not be completed as required. And then there's also the problem that the sewer line is in there and they have a fire service line 5 feet from the sewer. All right.
We did go through, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying here.
Yes, sir.
And I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up at this point. To note, we did have a technical review committee. The fire chief and the director of the Department of Public Works both signed off on, the access routes. And so that's, that is, it's out of our purview because that's not what we're engaged in. So that, quite apart from the other points that you made relative to parallel parking, which, are definitely within your purview. The others were outside of both your purview and our purview.
But I can comment.
Right. Do you have another?
That is, I believe that was everything I had. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
sir.
So again, Mr. Chairman, this is Brent Runyon, and I would just ask him to go through his education, occupation, and your experience. Also, you mentioned your college, your graduate thesis.
I'll talk about it, yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'll try not to take too much time. Tend to be short-winded. So my name is Brent Runyon. I live in Providence. I am the principal historic preservation consultant at my own firm, Runyon Heritage Associates, which I founded last year. I have a Master of Historic Preservation degree from the University of Georgia. I've been working in the field for 20 years, including a dozen or more historic rehabilitation tax credit projects, several National Register nominations. I served on the Georgia National Register Review Board, and I've been working on quite a few projects in Rhode Island over the last year. Most recently, I was executive director of the Providence Preservation Society for about 10 years, where I delivered a lot of testimony before boards like yours and had a lot of late nights as well. I'm also, my thesis topic was actually how to make affordable housing fit within local historic districts, because Georgia was trying to keep them out of many small towns in Georgia. So concerning topic. So I'm a big proponent of affordable housing. I serve on the advisory board for Housing Works Rhode Island for the last 7 years. And so, as you know, the Low and Moderate Income Housing Act requires that you make certain required findings, including that there will be no significant negative impacts on the health and safety of current or future residents in the community in areas including but not limited to the preservation of natural, historical, or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. I haven't seen a finding on that yet in any of the reports. As Attorney Salvatore said, the local review board has the same power to issue permits or approvals, such as the Historic District Commission would do, and is therefore required to seek a certificate of appropriateness for the redevelopment of this property, including the new construction. And while the guidelines for new construction on the town that the town has are quite vague, I think I'll give you some support where there are national recommendations and guidelines for such. The issue about whether or not the building is subordinate, I'll talk about as well. And like you, I'm unable in any of the materials provided, including what was presented months ago, I'm unable to evaluate the materials given by the information. It's a little bit contradictory. There are composite windows shown in the new building on the elevations, but in the packet, those are vinyl window products. So just there alone, there's some contradiction that I found. So in my view, the proposed development should be denied if possible. It doesn't uphold the Low and Moderate Income Housing Act in that the proposal will do two things: have a negative impact on the historic character of the district and destroy the integrity of the historic school and its site. And I'll talk about why that is. So with regard to the historic character of the district, according to Warren Standards and Guidelines for the historic district, new construction is to be of high quality and of a nature that fits the context of the historic district. According to the National Register of Historic Places nomination, the context is partially defined by the district's remarkable homogeneity of scale and character, which is easily seen in the mostly residential area between Main and Water Streets. Large primary buildings are set near or to the front of the lot line. I only found one exception to this rule once you get off the commercial streets. Also, according to the nomination, the district's plan and physical arrangement reveals significant patterns of forces that shape a community. And I'm quoting here, its several schools testified to the evolution of pedagogical methods and the suitable setting for their employment. And I'll speak to that in a little bit more. With regard to the integrity of the building and the setting, there's been a lot made of the fact that they're preserving the original building, which I think is very laudable, but there's more to it when you're talking about historic preservation. Preserving the individual building is but one piece of the puzzle. Aside from the age of the buildings, there are two factors that need to be qualified, that buildings or sites have to be qualified as historic. One is integrity, the other is significance. Now, significance of the place is embodied in it, and it can't be destroyed unless you destroy the building. Then you just have a memory of significance. Integrity, on the other hand, is the ability of a property to convey that significance, and that can be destroyed. The National Register of Historic Places identifies 7 aspects of historic integrity. So these are not vague terms. These are very well defined federally. They are location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And I believe what is at risk with the current proposal are 2 of these: the design and the setting of the Liberty Street School. The town of Warren does reference the Secretary of the Interior standards on its Historic District Committee's website. The standards specify that new construction within the boundaries of historic properties can be added, quote, if site conditions allow and if the design, density, and placement respect the overall character of the site. The word character is very specifically used. Standard 9 in particular states that, quote, new construction needs to be built in a manner that protects the integrity of the historic buildings and the property's setting. So for 10 Liberty Street, the school building and its property together constitute a site, but the setting is the overall historic district, specifically the block it's on and the blocks that surround it. According to federal guidance, quote, the site, including its associated features, contributes to the overall character of the historic property. As a result, the relationship between the buildings and landscape features within the site's boundaries should be considered in the overall planning. So I think what I'm going to talk about is the landscape features, which have not been addressed. And so what are the relationships between this building and its landscape? This may have been discussed at a previous meeting, but I haven't seen it address anything in writing. So as we all know, it was built in 1848, designed by Thomas Teft, and the significance of the integrity of the site are related to the educational philosophy of Henry Barnard, who in the 19th century was inarguably the most important philosopher around the idea of education. In Rhode Island, he was fortunate to have been in Rhode Island for a short time. And his ideas about school design are evident in the design of this building. He wrote extensively, and if we analyze his writings, we can see that both the shade trees in the front and the open space in the rear of the building are integral to the design and therefore to the site's integrity. He writes that, quote, "The building must be surrounded by a yard. This yard should be large enough in front for all to occupy in common for recreation and sport, and planted with shady trees. In the rear of the building, one portion should be assigned exclusively for the boys and the other for the girls." He goes on to talk about the importance of playgrounds where the real dispositions and habits of pupils are more palpably developed and can be more wisely trained. So as you can see, the landscape is important, and if you destroy it, then you're destroying the integrity. The National Park Service recommends against radically changing buildings and site features which are important in defining the overall character of the property, so that as a result, the character is diminished. And they recommend, quote, "Designing new exterior additions to historic buildings or adjacent new construction, which is compatible with the historic character of the site, which preserves a historic relationship between the building and its landscape." Further, they do not recommend introducing new construction into historic districts that is visually incompatible or that destroys historic relationships within the setting. The current proposal violates several principles of situating new construction in historic districts. In particular, with regard to the integrity of the site, the size of the proposed building ensures that historically important schoolyards that Barnard talked about will be eliminated, destroying the integrity of the site. With regard to the character of the historic district, the siting of such a massive building in relation to the historical building disrupts the district's, quote, "remarkable homogeneity of scale and character," with primary buildings that are typically situated near the front of the lots. If it were subordinate to the building, in size to the historic building, the siting at the back of the lot might not have such a negative impact on the character of the district. But as has been discussed, it is not subordinate in size. With regard to the Preservation Commission's adherence to the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines for new construction, according to the National Park Service, quote, "When visible and in close proximity to historic buildings, new construction must be subordinate to those buildings." So this building appears to be larger than the existing building and appears even larger because of the way it's turned perpendicular. So although it's been said that it will not be visually, it will be visually subordinate. It appears to me that once they do their removal of trees in the front and along the lot line and on the property, it will not be visually subordinate either. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Excuse me for 1 second. You said that you are also on the board of Housing Works Rhode Island. Are you still on the board of Housing?
Yes,
Works
the
Rhode
advisory
Island?
board, yes.
And so I think the one thing that we have to take into consideration is the new housing laws and the housing czar of Rhode Island and what this person thinks and what they are then thinking in relation to outweighing historic preservation and the need for affordable housing. They are essentially in these laws saying that affordable housing supersedes historic preservation, whether we agree with it or not. Am I wrong in that?
Is that what they're saying?
That seems to be what they're saying.
They haven't eliminated all the other laws that, but I agree, affordable housing is so necessary, like direly necessary. Not every site can accommodate an intensity of affordability that they're asking for. I've been giving a lot of testimony for 20 years, and I'm always amazed that when boards, I'm not saying you're doing this, but it appears when boards take a developer's word on what their pro forma looks like and how it can't work otherwise, unless you approve what they're asking for. So as I said, another building situated perhaps in the same location that is smaller would not have such a dire effect on the integrity of the site or the district. Could it work? Could it work financially? Who knows?
Right.
Could they do more affordable housing throughout? I haven't heard how much they're selling any of the units for. I haven't heard what level of affordability is. Is it 120? Is it 80? Is it 60% AMI? There are a lot of questions. So yes, I think affordability is very important. This site is really constrained in a lot of ways, but I still think it could work with some careful planning and good architecture.
Thank you.
Can I just respond to the law part of it, the housing law? I mean, whether historic preservation affordability supersedes historic preservation. The new law has the exact same required findings as the old law. I am very much involved in real estate development and particularly housing development. I am also a huge proponent of affordable housing and I speak on it all the time. I think Brent and I are in the same position where I wouldn't object to a proposal like this unless I thought it was not an appropriate development. I want to be clear, the required findings still have the same language that he just read to you, whether it was pre-January, which that's the statute you're under, is pre-January 1st. It's the same as post-January 1st. So you still have to consider the historic preservation aspects, as well as safe circulation, environmental impacts, things like that.
Then why did they make all that up under the planning board's purview rather than
I would not.
leave it?
I think we'll
Hang on.
leave it in
Because
there.
we are not experts in those areas.
I think that we need to stay, Mr. Chair, I think we need to stand past in terms of the application before you, we need to keep the questions and the conversation relevant to the
This
application.
particular.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that the board understands the law.
I know, we've gone through this and there is definitely, there are definitely some problems with that legislation. And quite frankly, that is one of the burdens that we are under. So, it is at every chance we get to talk to those people who have had something to do with this legislation. It's bad legislation, very bad. And it's destroying, it has the potential to destroy the quality of life in this town. I mean, you quoted a 5 unit per acre. We've got 40 units going in 4 acres. Completely out of proportion and out of scale to the neighborhood. Nonetheless, we have been forced to approve that because of this incredibly flawed legislation. That said, the points you've made here, to me, the strongest points are that none of the board seems comfortable with what this preliminary plan actually looks like. I mean, we have received information in the past, but we do not have a clear, I mean, I don't know if the rest of the board would agree with me. But I think what I'm hearing is we're not seeing exactly what this plan is. And according to Ben, this is our chance. So if we don't see exactly the points, we can't be saying, yes, we approve this and we're going to do some tweaks later on.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend at this point, I believe they have one more person. However, I think they're willing to come back if we're going to continue this next month. However, there's people from the public here. I think that would be appropriate to allow them to also have an input in terms of.
Yeah, again, I'm not closing the public hearing at this point, but I'm showing you where we're leaning. I mean, the points here and the concerns that have been evidenced by the members of the board certainly say to me that we don't have enough information to make a clear and well-informed decision. It cannot be, this is sort of what it's like. I mean, those decisions about even the cladding on the side of the building, the windows, the 3 bedrooms that we've mentioned, these were things that we've asked, and there were concerns earlier on, but at the very least, we absolutely have to have a clear and unequivocal understanding of what this is before we could make a reasonable decision. Are there other members of the public that would like to speak to this? Or, you know, my inclination is we're probably gonna go to a continuance.
Just for us, Mr. Chairman, we did have Doug McLean, but he's willing to come back in respecting your time so that you can get on to your
Okay.
other applications.
I mean, if, I'd like to make a motion that we, first of all, we close the public hearing.
Keep it open because Mr.
Oh,
Mallon
'cause we're
asked for a
continuing.
letter. There's somebody here from the public that also wants to speak, so I think that's gonna continue. We have to continue the public hearing.
Okay. We'll have a continuance of this meeting.
And can I make one comment at this point? You know, in terms of the things I'd like to see is detailed cut sheets of every material that's gonna appear on the outside of the building. Many places you say, finished to be selected. You have this or that, you have or similar. We can't have any or similar or finished to be selected. If we're acting as all the different boards that we're being expected to act as, then we need those details in this application.
Exactly.
So I would also ask if there are other, I agree with Jenny, that would be helpful to facilitate the consideration. But could we list other things that they need to do to satisfy us, Fred?
If there's any concerns, I believe tonight's the night, there is a
That-
90-day limit on you for the certificate of completeness. Therefore, you can extend it, but they're approving. So let's work within those 90 days. I think next meeting, we're still good, the board's still good. And so I think there's concerns, I'll write like a list. I think we need to tell the applicant tonight, therefore, we can get the answers at the next public hearing.
And the cut sheet would also include not just metal railings, but what the type of metal railing is, not just exterior lights, but what those exterior lights
Yeah,
are.
and let's make something very clear. You gotta stick to the application. You can't deviate from the
But,
application. The
but I
application-
don't understand what
I
the lights
understand.
are or
But
what
you
the
can ask
railing
questions
is.
about the application itself, and that's not deviate from what's being presented in the application. Thank you.
So for instance, a revised parking plan, there've been a lot of comments on that. If they're gonna change the parking plan, that ought to be on the record.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think equally important, there was the traffic study that was requested and that has not been, was my understanding, no?
So there's an application of record. That is the application that you're reviewing. This is not a time frame where you receive additional information and consider that as part of the application. What you're going to do is to decide on the application, whether it is denial, approval, approval with condition. If you feel that there's additional information that you need that warrants denial, then deny. But you have to specifically identify your reasons for denial. If you are generally agreeable with the application, but you feel there's some general information in it that you need additionally, you may be willing to approve with condition. And that could be submitted either require that it be submitted and that you have to come back as part of a revised preliminary, which is predominantly getting at the denial side of things, or that you're comfortable enough with, if you get that information, it could be submitted as part of the final plan application. But you cannot keep getting information as it pertains to the application of record. That is what you're deciding.
Wait, can I please respond to this? While it was insinuated that I was not prepared, the only documentation I have with any of the details that were provided is titled Liberty Street School Info Only Packet. How can I know that an info only packet is a packet of record? Because that definitely insinuates that this was a very preliminary and we do not have any indication of what has been chosen and where. And so that is why, if that is a denial, then that is a denial, but that is my reason for denying because I was
Mr.
not
Chairman, if
provided
I
that
could get a
information.
point of order. Our application process is online with regard to our regulations. There's a checklist that's required of every single step of the application that indicates what needs to be submitted as part of an application. This particular application was deemed complete based on going through that checklist. And with regard to initially them being deemed incomplete, they submitted additional information. So the application before you is complete as it pertains to your checklist. I want to remind the board that you're all sitting in a quasi judicial fashion. You need to weigh the benefits and costs of the application that's before you and the information that's in that application. Based on the merits of that, from what you hear and all that, and that is part of your deliberation, you're not currently in deliberation. So I caution the board in terms of what you're saying at this particular time frame in a quasi judicial fashion, please.
And I stick by that, considering I cannot access the file because the one that is online does not load. And so I cannot make a decision without the pertinent information in my hands.
Mr. Chair, what I would recommend at this point, it seems like there's a lot of information shared. The applicant obviously is well aware of some concerns, some issues, and they will respond what they think is appropriate. I do think it's appropriate at this point, just to continue this to next month, the public hearing, and again, members of the public can continue to submit up to that point comments as the public hearing is continuing. However, the application is the application.
I make a motion to continue.
Well, I'd like to hear from the applicant, because we need the permission of the applicant to continue it, correct?
No, the board has 90 days to come up with a decision.
Okay.
Or, yeah, and we're not within those 90 days according to the planner. After those 90 days, we get close, then we're gonna need permission from the applicant.
Oh, after the
90 days.
How much time do we have left?
That I have to specifically go back and look at the particular dates, but basically, once it was deemed complete, it went on the meeting coming up, and then it was continued for the last, 3 months, I believe.
If I may, Mr. Chair, certainly you have the authority to continue this to the next meeting. And certainly, I do believe we have the ability to provide you with finer details, such as specific cut sheets and such, so that that information is open here in the public. I would candidly like to receive a copy specifically of the info-only packet that the board received, just so I know exactly what the board received, because we have submitted a substantial amount of information. The last point I'd like to make is that, in fact, we did submit a cross appeal on the decision that was signed and filed in the land evidence records, because I believe that written decision is not in keeping with either the minutes or the recorded motion that was made by you, Mr. Massey, because in that motion, you acknowledged that the linden trees were going to have to be removed. And in that motion, you asked that we reduce, not eliminate, the number of 3-bedroom units. However, the signed and recorded decision has the 3-bedroom limits units removed. And it says that the western linden tree shall be preserved. So those are in direct contradiction of one another.
Yeah, great.
And so that we do in fact have a cross appeal that we have filed in accordance with the appeal that was filed by council. So that does exist. We fully understand your desire for more information, more detailed information specifically regarding the siding and such, and other details. So we will be providing that to the board.
Okay,
So I believe you have a motion from
Mr. Matson to continue. Second,
Billy, what's the date certain for the next planning board meeting? It's gotta be certain.
June 24th.
And then the June 24th.
Yes.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Next item on the,
Chairman.
next item on the agenda is St. Mary of the Bay Church, Plat 3, Lot 92, owner, can we have a quiet please over there, folks, ladies, we're moving along. Please. St. Mary of the Bay Church, Plat 3, Lot 92, owner St. Mary Bay Church, combined preliminary and final plan, single lot creation for one single family house, as well as a public street connecting Water Street with Linden Street public hearing.
So we scheduled the public hearing for our next meeting.
Yeah.
How we're gonna do both?
What do you mean?
We just said this for the 24th as well.
This, what are you referring to? I can't see what you're.
Yeah, we.
No, it's the 20th is the, I thought was the, well,
I don't think so.
we had the comprehensive plan, Herb, the same day, right?
I'm sorry.
The comprehensive plan public hearing.
Is on the 24th.
Yes,
And we just rescheduled this for the 24th.
it's okay.
So you would have to have a special, because then you would see the 90 days possibly if you went on another.
All right, you see my point? I
Yeah.
mean,
So, well, it's important enough that we have to do that, so.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We will try to be brief. My name is William Dennis. I'm an attorney with offices in Bristol, Rhode Island. I'm here tonight representing the applicant, St. Mary of the Bay Church. We appeared last in March for a pre-app master approval, which we did receive with some concern over storm water drainage coming from the existing small single-family home on the property. Neighbors appeared to express that concern that water from the gutters and downspouts were finding their way to the northwesterly corner of the lot. Since that March meeting, Principe Engineering has designed a small drainage facility, which I understand has been constructed, actually takes the water from the existing home and directs it in actuality to the easterly portion of the lot, and is contained in a galley, an underground galley. So we are in hopes that that particular issue has been resolved in accordance with our understanding from the March meeting. We're here this evening for a preliminary and final approval of this plan to create a single buildable lot on the northerly side of what would become a public street. On Friday, we received notice from Mr. Durfee that another neighbor had sent a letter to the planning department indicating concern over two issues. One issue was the underground sewer line that these neighbors, in fact, had installed themselves at their own expense for their own home. And there seemed to be a concern that our proposed lot would somehow get involved in that line. And I did get an opportunity to speak with them earlier tonight in the hallway. And it's the applicant's position that we have no intention whatever to be involved in that existing sewer line. That's the first issue. The second issue happened to be drainage, essentially drainage on the parking lot. The parking lot drainage, which, as the board knows, is an incline flowing east to west down to Water Street. And there was a concern that the drainage was inadequate and somehow could be improved. In reading the staff report, we concur with the planning department that this matter, assuming we receive a final approval, will go before the Warren Town Council on the issue of acceptance of the street. And at that point in time, I think the council will be educated as to the drainage situation that exists. And they will make their decision based on, I believe, their satisfaction that the drainage there is adequate. And if it needs to be improved, how it will be improved. I can say that, you know, between the church and the Little League and the town of Warren, you know, before a street would be accepted by the council, the drainage would be studied, and that's all in accordance with the staff report. So as far as those issues are concerned, we hope that the Rabideaus who are here tonight will be comforted to know that we don't have any intention to interfere with the existing sewer lateral that they installed. And as far as the drainage is concerned, the church is not aware that there's been a drainage issue. It hasn't been an issue for the church or the town in the past that we're aware of, but we're certainly willing to entertain whatever concerns the town council may have before that area is accepted as a public street. Tonight, of course, we have our engineer, Thomas Principe, who has studied the issue of the sewer and studied the issue of the drainage. This came up last month as well, but any builder who attempts to get a building permit for the proposed lot will have to convince the town of Warren under the soil erosion and sediment control laws that that lot as developed will not contribute or exacerbate any drainage situation that might exist right now. Mr. Principe, did you want to elaborate on any of this? Thank you.
Good evening again, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Principe, Engineering. Again, just on council's point, I just want to go back to the conversation we had last month with the drainage and the neighbor in the back. So the northwest corner and the back left corner of this, if you can zoom in, a neighbor made a note about ponding in the northwest corner of the property, which is the low point. And mainly it's being contributed by the existing runoff from the existing single-family dwelling there. And again, in good faith and in the latest revised plans that was submitted for the record for this application, what we did is we redirected. There's 2 roof gutters, roof leaders in the backyard, and those were obviously draining down towards the northwest corner of the site. What we did on the design plans and what was recently constructed last week was those 2 roof leaders were rediverted to a underground drainage mitigation system off to the front right corner, so the right side of the driveway right there, into an underground system. So I believe we also asked the neighbor who's here this evening, who can attest to that. We actually asked them if they've had any ponding in that area, and I believe the answer was no, which is a good thing because all that stormwater is now being redirected away towards the side yard and also infiltrated itself. We did not connect the 2 front roof leaders. Again, that does drain towards the parking lot. And again, the discussions we had last month, I kind of elaborated heavily on the reasons why, and that this is our above and beyond design from our client. And when a developer does come through and does quote unquote develop this property or construct a residential dwelling here, it is they are obligated to conform with the local ordinance and the soil erosion and the drainage requirements. So that will have its own drainage system. But again, we don't know what size that building is, configuration, and the driveway. That's not what we're here for this evening, just for the creation of that lot. So, and again, to add to council's point on the sewer, again, it's Herb, that's a blurry.
Don't know why.
Okay, so I apologize, board members of the board.
What they submitted was perfectly clear. So
Right.
I don't know what happened.
Okay.
It's a different file. It's a different file in there.
Okay. Well, if you remember from last application, again, there's a diagonal there. So the utilities from the existing dwelling cut on a 45-degree angle on the proposed property. And then the Rabideau's off to the left side of the page, which is to the west towards Water Street. There is a existing 4-inch sewer line, which was brought up this evening. So they're tied into, there's a main trunk line, a 4-inch main line, if you will, that was constructed years ago. And the Rabideau's are tied into that same 4-inch line. And this existing dwelling is also tied in. Again, an easy solution when it comes to construction, not now, because we're not proposing anything. We could also just put our own 4-inch line as well and not even touch that. Because again, if there's issues with that line, we're not going to want to touch it. We'll have our own separate service going down. There's an 18-inch main in Water Street. Obviously, the sewer treatment plant's right there. So again, that's after this application, if it goes forward. So with those 2 points, those are just the 2 main engineering points I wanted to make.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the work that, again, was not, we couldn't mandate it.
Right.
It was done out of goodwill. So we greatly appreciate that and address the neighbor's issue of flooding.
Right.
So, and I understand from the letter, and again, we'll want to hear from the Rabideau's, but that you have no intention of tapping into that line, which would not address the situation, which is really outside of our purview, the existing situation. What we're looking at is the application as it relates to this particular property and the fact that that would have a line running directly into the sewer line. So that's, there's clearly an issue there, but it's, again, outside the purview of this.
Although, if I can ask, if you do run a new line, that would entail cutting up the pavement in the to be proposed street, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So I think the council should be aware of that when they accept the street, that if anything is done to the street, I mean, the Public Works hates having partial pavement, and I don't know where, I've forgotten where Warren is right now with regard to utility cuts into pavement and whether we require, edge to edge repaving when there's utility cuts.
Again, not
Our current reg. Our current regs are curb to center line, but at some point, the Public Works Director is going to do curb to curb.
I just want to be aware.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I honestly don't even know if this is here or the council, but I guess pedestrian safety, people are used to obviously that being a parking lot. And so that would actually be my only concern is that the street would end into the parking lot and people and kids are kind of willy-nilly. And as it becomes a street, then it does the church. I mean, I don't even know if that's here. Like, I don't think it like it has.
It's not our,
Okay.
that would be the town
Town
council and
council, okay.
the Department
Correct.
of Public Works. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak to this?
Motion to open public.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Can I have a motion for open a public hearing?
So,
Mike, Jenny, second?
Yes.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Yes, please, thanks.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. I am Carol Rabideau. I do own 426 Rear Water Street, otherwise known as Plat 5 Lot 92. I submitted a whole packet to the planner to give to you, including pictures. We got this from the sewer department, shows that we do have an entirely private line that was installed by Mr. Fred Bartlett. And the existing home illegally tied into my line. So that was number one. And now I see there's pictures of number 2 tying into my line. Well, as they say, they'll run a separate line. The backup from the first house is causing my home a lot of concern. We are on a flat, we have no cellar. It's a crawl space with dirt and the sewage is backing up. We've had to have our lawn dug up and fixed because it's backing up. And this additional development is going to cause more sewage through the pipe.
Well, again, my understanding is that it's a separate line.
It is not. We put in the original line, they came across the property and tied into my
Right,
line.
that was, again, the existing dwelling.
Correct.
Right, this one that's going in,
Right, but the plans show that the new development has the line going through right into the second line, the original house's development, which is tied into me.
I
So
mean, I
the
don't-
one thing is, right now, we're not really looking at the development of a new house. And so right now, it's just subdividing the lot. And so if somebody were to buy that lot and put a house there, they would have to come back and do all of this again. And so that would be the time that you would really want to do that. But I know the planner, they had mentioned that to address this issue, you should talk to the church on a separate kind of thing. So just,
Right,
I
and
just
I've
want
done
to make sure
that over
that
the years
that's
and gone
clear.
nowhere. But my second concern is we do still have pooling in the back part of my property. There's like tall grass growing because of the swampage. We cannot move the house elevated up or anything, or even put in a cellar because of the water zone where you hit water right away. We're in such a flood zone. In front of my house right there, I've provided pictures with this last storm. The drainage that the church was kind enough to put in has collapsed, and I've addressed it several times with the priests. It is backing up. I have pictures that show the water damage, not water damage, excuse me, the water backing up through the whole driveway, right up to my property line, and up my driveway. So that needs to be addressed also. Yeah, there they are. Thank you.
yeah, I mean, again, I think, you know, the existing problem, I understand it. In the development of this new piece, they could not make this any worse than it already is. And in fact, you know, have done a good faith with the existing building. But this, again, is not our responsibility. I mean, I understand and I appreciate your concerns. It seems to me that that's a town issue, a Department of Public Works issue, which is, again, outside. of
Well,
our
it will
purview.
be once, if the town decides to take over the street. Right now, it's a church issue. and
I
stuff
think
is
that
getting
if the
done.
town,
Better for you.
I think if the
That would
town,
be better for me,
if the
yes.
Right,
town-
so no, it better be.
hold on. If the town takes over the street, they would have to address this issue. So in fact, I think it could be a win for you if this is what happens, because right now I don't know how long this has been going on. My understanding is that other house has been there for,
Yeah, it's been going on
A long-
for years,
yeah, so.
like two priests.
I think that
Quite a lot.
ultimately if the applicant's request to the town council, which is separate from their request to us, is met, I think you've got a very good chance of having the issue that you're concerned about being addressed.
Mhm.
So that's, you know, I would say that it's,
And then the other thing I was wondering, I was told that the boundary line for this home was going to be 10 feet from my driveway. That's awfully close.
That's your boundary line now, isn't it?
No. They're saying that from my boundary line, the house is going to be only 10 feet away from my boundary line.
This will have the engineer from the church respond to that.
Okay,
Give you an answer, okay?
okay.
Yes. But again, there's no house. So in the first proposal, I remember the dimensions, there wasn't a variance on the dimensions of the new property. And then therefore, if whoever builds it would have to come and get those dimensional if there was any,
if there's.
in the event that there is. And so that's the other thing.
Mr. Chair, can Mr. Principe respond to that?
Yes.
To the answer?
Yeah. So again, I just want to elaborate, and again, I have a laptop up here, which you can look at, which Herb has. So this west side property line here, that's the legal boundary line of the entire parcel. And then this little gray square there, that is your driveway. So there's two separate things here. It's the legal boundary line here, which a house cannot go near that. This dashed line, yeah, that's okay. This dashed line off to the right-hand side of this line, and I'm going to just show you here.
Okay.
That is the building envelope, the building setback. So a building, whoever builds here cannot go closer to the property line than that. So it's gonna be 10 feet,
This is
and I'm not,
where-
and that's your driveway, so that's about another 5 to 8 feet, it's on an angle. So it's gonna be 15 feet from your driveway. However, again, we don't know what's gonna get built,
Right.
how big it's gonna be compliant with the zoning setbacks and the lot coverage. But also, not all times do developers come right on that side setback. So we're not saying it's going to be exactly 10 feet either. That's the worst case scenario. It can't go any less than that, but it could be 15, it could be a little.
Yeah, if they try to go less than that, as an abutter, you will be legally notified.
Correct.
Therefore, you go before the zoning board and then obviously you raise your concerns. Okay.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So
Thank
they,
you.
is there anything they can do about the flooding that continues on my property from the runoff?
No, I think
No,
that's
that's-
going to be something that the town will have to handle. But again, as I said, I think that, you know, in an odd sort of way, the development of this land and the request for this to be a street will in fact benefit you.
Yeah, the street, definitely,
Right.
but, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mary Hunt, 50 Wheaton Street, very quickly. I came here last meeting with those flooding concerns. The engineer, the church, they have been wonderful. They have responded in good faith. I just want to tell you that this process is working and thank you for everything you're doing. It's a ton of time, it's a ton of effort, and the process worked the way it was supposed to, and it may feel like it doesn't always. So I just, you are appreciated and I hope you hear it more.
What?
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you very much. And we needed that.
Right.
But that's great. You know, this is the kind of win we'd like to see. So thank you very much. And I think at this point,
Nobody else in the public? Motion to close the public hearing?
motion to close the public hearing. Mike, second.
Second.
Richard, all in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
just one quick administrative type concern is that initially, I believe we had a motion to combine the preliminary and the final. I spoke briefly with the planner earlier, and because it's gonna be an improvement, the town needs an opportunity to see if an improvement guarantee is necessary, and if so, bring it back to this board for approval. Procedurally, that's how it works. In other words, if they have to come up with a bond to back up their work and improvement of town, you are given those numbers, the reasoning, and have the authority to approve an amount. Therefore, I think it's appropriate after council speaks, to consider a motion to separate preliminary and final. If you want to approve preliminary, that's obviously within your purview. However, allow that surety or some type of guarantee to be examined by the town and come before a final plan and get your approval on it.
Okay, and does that have in any way relationship to the declaration of the street?
Yes.
Yeah, that's-
Absolutely. it is,
Right,
yes.
okay.
That's exactly what my issue was. I assumed council was, when he talked about a bond and improvements, I'm assuming we're talking about the drainage in the parking lot, the collapsed basin, or whatever the issue might be there. And our expectation was that, based on the staff report, that Department of Public Works was going to be looking at this situation, that Fuss and O'Neill might actually be looking at the situation and providing an opinion. And as I mentioned before, church is fairly confident that between the Warren Little League and our relationship with the town of Warren, we're going to be able to work out this situation. The Little League Park, as you know, I think we mentioned it last time, is actually church property, and we licensed that to Warren Little League at no cost. Further, the parking area that we're talking about here is used for public parking by Warren residents. So we have a lot of confidence that between Public Works and Fuss and O'Neill, the church, the Little League, we'll be able to come to some type of arrangement, especially since, you know, we're hoping that this area becomes a public street. So Um, I understand that we may only receive a preliminary approval tonight based on that issue. And in that context, I would also ask the board to consider allowing our final to be administrative, if that makes sense under these circumstances.
Council, the only issue I have with that, I believe that the planning board has the authority to approve that guarantee. So before we give a final approval, therefore, if we do that in the same night, you come back here, well, and we talk about the bond or whatever it is, then they can obviously give you final at that point.
Even if it's waived by the council? Even if any?
I just don't have enough information.
That's right, yeah, I'm hoping any contribution by the church will be waived by the council. I'm hoping.
I don't know, I don't want to speak about the council, but therefore, that's why I asked them to separate it and come back and we can do both things.
Okay.
And if it's waived, it's waived, if not, then.
We'll work it out.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's a possibility that it could be an
Well,
administrative.
there's an
approval.
opportunity to see whether or not the town is gonna want to guarantee.
Yep.
And then if they do, you have to approve it, and if it's approved, then you go final approval that night and.
Okay, and I don't see that as being a long and drawn out process, the way some things are.
I've heard about those.
All right,
Can I?
yeah,
My question is, we're making a recommendation to the town council to accept the street? It's,
That's engineering or DPW, they'll come, you'll get us the estimate, if once required, you'll see the estimate, we'll discuss it whether or not it's reasonable, he agrees to it, if it's necessary, you approve it, and then the approval still will be conditioned on town council acceptance of the.
right, well, and so I'm just wondering, since there's going to be another sewer line that's likely to put in, could, if the other house is developed at a later date by a developer, could we put a condition that at that time, the existing dwelling that's currently owned by the church be tied into that new line? Would we be able to do that?
Negative. That was gonna correct you.
Okay. Oh, I did have one other question. There's pavement that shows on the plan that encroaches beyond the proposed lot line onto the new house lot that's got the house on it. Can we request that that pavement be removed? That would help with some of the, that would reduce runoff by removing pavement. And, okay, again, I'm just asking the question.
Sure, the answer is negative. It's just a minor subdivision, but technically it's a major because of the road, that's why you're here. So
do we need to go by the points for a major subdivision, or can this simply be an approval of the preliminary?
Yeah, correct, so you need a motion to separate preliminary from final.
Right.
So that's the.
Do I have a motion to separate
Motion.
preliminary to final? Ashley, second. Second, Richard, all in favor? And then
A motion.
the motion to approve the preliminary plan.
Motion made.
Second.
Richard, second. Terry,
Yes.
Ashley?
Mr. Chair, with the condition that that road is.
Exactly, with the conditions that the road is approved by the town council and that any further conditions would be potentially brought back to us.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
That's
very good.
Yes, the plan is also asking about the staff report. I'm not sure if you want to put those conditions in there as part of the approval.
You want to put those up on
Oh, sorry. I thought I put them up as in motion, sorry.
Basically, it's got so basically it has the galley system for the stormwater piping with regard to 430 Water Street gutters, which was already spoken to by Ms. Hunt. with regard to the Rabideau property, it's essentially acknowledging that a number of the issues are really a civil matter between the church and the Rabideaus. But that there is acknowledgement that there is some frequent flooding that actually occurs in that area. Notably, this spring has been the wettest on record, and that May 8th was the date of the new moon, which means that there's a higher tide during that time frame, and so there's a slower stormwater discharge. We would need, just as we had spoken about, I would suggest that the commission agree with the finding that the DPW director be asked, along with our on-call engineer, Fuss and O'Neill, to look at the roadway and its related infrastructure in terms of making a recommendation as to its acceptance as a public street.
Do we accept it as a public street, or does the town council? Right, so.
They would have to, under normal statutory requirements and our town code, they would have to pay attention to post-construction stormwater control, which their engineer already spelled out in terms of no net new runoff from the property. And these conditions would fall with regard, they would run with the land, so to speak. So anybody developing the property would be on the hook for whatever you approve. The sewer line, as we understand it, that they would be creating a new, whomever would be developing it would be creating a new lateral wastewater line. So the civil matter of the wastewater line between the Rabideaus and the church would remain a civil matter between those parties and not the town. Anything with regard to structural development, again, the wastewater line and other matters with regard to development, that would be part of the building permit application process, whether it's the church or a successor property. And then in keeping with what I had just mentioned, that with any final approval, and in this particular case, it's where I know we've separated it. So the report overall would just be, it would have to acknowledge that the conditions are related to the preliminary condition of a preliminary approval rather than the combination of preliminary and final plan. But in essence, any infrastructure that's necessary, the applicant at the time for structural development would be responsible for preparing plans and detailed specifications as necessary for the building office and the zoning administrator to properly address a permit. And then there are general conditions that if there's any construction easement required on an adjacent property, that be worked out to the satisfaction of the building official, that there be an easement, basically a temporary construction easement put in place. Any state and federal permits that are necessary would need to be garnered. You have to meet NFPA fire code and building codes. Prior to issuance of any certificate of occupancy, any fees that are owed the town should be paid to the town. And then we do require as-bills, and that the as-bills, when they are submitted, ultimately they do get recorded with any public improvements noted thereon in our land records, and any fee would be payable at the time of such recording by the applicant at that time. That's the general nature of the staff report.
Okay.
And those are pretty short staff reports.
I'd hate to see a long one. No, I think that most of those are covered under, the zoning regulations through the town. But as a point of order, we will include those findings in the motion that was approved for the preliminary plan approval. So.
Do you vote on it? You get a second, a vote?
Second, we got a,
Second.
okay, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right,
Need the stenographer to take all this down.
you know, I don't want to go there.
Produce the test record from the law.
Well, I think this is,
I'm get a 5-minute break just so it's not quick on here. 5 minutes.
sure. Do we, I mean, I'm not sure we need the stenographer for all of this. I think it was primarily for Liberty Street.
Wait a minute, is somebody
I think,
taking
yeah.
minutes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I mean, we're gonna pay them.
you know, this isn't controversial, really. I think, yeah, thank you, Cindy, I appreciate it.
It's not controversial.
Can we just finish it off with the other one?
Yeah, they're just gonna give me a little time. Okay.
Long tonight.
Yeah, you know, and the odd thing here is that that was almost like going through the whole thing again. It's frustrating that we've had to go through it so many times, but a lot of good points.
I got one
Are we
question.
taking a break, Herb? What are we
Well, it's
doing?
in litigation. Why are we even discussing?
Well, that to
What are we
me
doing?
was surprising. What?
Are we breaking or?
Oh,
what?
really?
Yeah, because she's.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because just for clarification, the reason that we went through that with the preliminary plan for Liberty Street is because the applicant asked for it and they have the right to ask for it.
You know, it seems like it's been difficult to understand what it is they want us to approve.
I went out.
No, again, I just wanted to clarify why we were going through that. But, you know, beyond that, we can't really talk about it anymore. Commercial way development, master plan application, unified development review, RIGL 452350.1B3, merger of 3 lots, AP 23, lots 118, 119, 120, and the construction of 2 additional trades type buildings with retentions of existing buildings along with site improvements. Owner Commercial Way Properties LLC, and this is a public hearing. We'll open it up after you've done your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney John Shikachi for the applicant, Conway Properties LLC. Mr. Scott DeSilvera is one of the principals. He's here this evening. The board has specific questions for him. As you mentioned, we're asking to merge 3 lots into 1. This project has previously been approved by this honorable board, actually more intense with 1 extra building. It inadvertently ran out, so we're here this evening before you under unified zoning application, which I believe is somewhat new to this board, where you have the power, if needed, to give any dimensional relief, but there is no dimensional relief required. So under the old regs, we'll be asking for a development plan review, kind of at the master/preliminary level, and a special use permit is what we'd be asking for. Under case law, that's a special exception. Has been unified in under statute and case law. It's a conditionally permitted use that we're asking for this evening. We've read the staff's recommendations and the conditions they requested. We're more than happy to meet them all. In the staff's report, they asked that we try to be a little more specific on the type of uses that we'll be requesting. We're typically asking for what is known as flex space, which more or less is your contractors, electricians, plumbers, HVAC contractors, auto detailing, to give some examples, light auto repair, police and fire apparatus repair contractors, things similar to that type of use. And was, like I mentioned, it was previously approved, and we're here cleaning up prior approval. At this time, I'd like to bring up Neil Hingeroy, who is the professional engineer who worked on the project. He can give us a little of an overview of what he's done, and we can address some of the topics that came up on the report. So if I could, Neil, why don't you come up and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, good evening. Neil Ingarani. I'm a PLS principal in Narragansett Engineering. Presented this project in front of this board in 2022, I'd like to say.
So why don't, if you don't mind, just briefly tell us what was previously approved, what you're proposing now, then we can kind of touch on the drainage and parkings and the different topics that were brought up in the report.
Sure. And actually, if we could go just a sheet, I think it's 2 sheets down, C100 would be perfect. Great. So much of what you're seeing is the same if anyone was on the board in 2022. The biggest change is the proposed building 6C all the way to the west. That was 2 buildings. We've basically merged that into a single building. In terms of site changes, that there's really not a lot. Some of the parking is reconfigured, but we still exceed the minimum number of spaces required. There was a fair amount of, I would say, stormwater engineering that went into reconfiguring the buildings. It is a high water table site. Getting the drainage to work was challenging, but not impossible. We've already got our RIPD's approval for the prior design. And we're in the process of just making sure that we cross our T's for the resubmission. So underground storage is reconfigured pretty significantly, but in terms of site configuration, I agree. It's slightly less intense by merging a building.
You touched on the drainage. Can you just tell us about that and confirmed with no negative impact, zero net runoff to any of the abutters?
That is correct. Yeah, it'll meet all the state standards for the drainage manual, which dovetail in with the towns. Yes, no net runoff to the abutters. All the environmental pollutants of concern for the receiving water body are mitigated with the stormwater system we're proposing.
And water and sewer are adequate?
That's correct, yes. They exist on site. We do have letters from BCWA.
And if the board allows us to do final administratively, you'll be able, as one of those conditions, be able to address in the final plan some questions that came about snow storage, trash, fire, and staying off the easement.
I see no reason that we can't meet the conditions of the staff report. That's correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if we get the final administratively, the major condition remaining for permitting is just a modification to the stormwater, correct?
That is correct.
And you anticipate no issues with that?
No, we've already spoke with DM, run the models. I see no issues with that resubmission.
Great. So we have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
No, I mean, as I remember, because I was here, we had 2 tradesmen's buildings, essentially. And you've taken the one on the, we'll call it the west, and made that one whole building as opposed to a series of bays. So the basic proposition here was, is still in effect. You've got the tradesmen's slots, and then the second building is for an existing business that is ready to move in. So,
correct. That's why I mentioned the specific, I wanted to be specific, the tenant that wants to come in does police and fire apparatus repair.
Yeah, and we'd heard that they're, we'd also keep them in Warren. And this is in essentially an industrial district.
It is.
I mean, it's very similar to what we saw before with, only a minor modification, quite frankly. So, I mean, I don't, again, if anybody has any questions who was here, who wasn't, didn't see the original, but it was well-designed and well-planned. I think the staff recommendations, as long as you're comfortable with those and the conditions that were established, we are, the same regulations still abide in terms of special use permits, because as you had.
Mr. Chair, now that you mentioned the special use permit, if I may, council is correct that this is here under a unified development review process. Previously, this board only did dimensional variances. Now it also has the authority to do special use permits, acting as the planning board. So, considering that the use has been previously approved and it's a category of uses, what this board needs to do today is, prior to making a approval or denial of the master plan, is make a motion for determination that he's met the standards for a special use permit. Therefore, we'll make sure it's on the record that what he's using it for is valid and authorized by the town of Warren. So if somebody, that's my recommendation legally, to make that determination on the record via motion.
Okay, let's, somebody want to make that motion?
Do you,
Yeah,
do you want to, do you
Yeah,
have
sure.
that?
So
Just
the
read it.
motion is that the use that is being proposed by the applicant has met all the standards under the use special use permit in the town zoning ordinance.
I make a motion.
Okay, Richard, a second. Mike Gerhard, all in favor?
Aye.
And then the second is to approve the master plan with the conditions as established by the, in the staff recommendations.
Well,
No, to-
if I may, technically, under the new statute, you have the power to, master's almost gone. Yeah, we go right to almost preliminary where a lot of the engineering's done. So if you're comfortable with it, you would approve the
Preliminary and
master in allow.
So check that box.
Right.
If the board is correct, if the board is comfortable with everything that's presented, he has no concerns, the planner has put some conditions on it, and if he has no other conditions, certainly would be appropriate to combine the master
Absolutely.
preliminary and give authorization for the planner to give final upon
Great.
submission.
Well
Even
said, thank
better.
you.
I will. Motion.
Okay, second to that. And so we're approving master and preliminary with the caveat that the final plan will be administered by the town planner.
It's subject to all the conditions that the planner recommended. We're more than happy to meet those. Thank you.
Correct. So all in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. See, you should have listened first.
Well, I wanted you to.
I'm only-
Oh, man. That's a lot to sit through.
Yeah, it is.
And here's the kitchen. Hi, awesome.
Should be good.
Yeah.
My only feedback was that if the statewide planning would have read the new SIDS, they would have known
So,
that we did use.
This is the Division of Statewide Planning Comments. If we were all sent those comments. Mike and Herb and I had a discussion of this, and I've had discussions with Herb as well. Herb has also consulted with Allison. There were a number of comments made in Herb and my estimation. These comments were relatively minor, although they appear to be more weighty than actually they are. But that said, and Mike's concern is well founded. You know, we do need to meet these expectations of the state. If not, in fact, at least by making it clear why we disagree with what those recommendations are. For example, you know, they said that our affordable housing is only 3.25, and they're using that formula that doesn't take into consideration the amount of affordable housing that's actually available here in Warren, because they're using the formula that the state developed for the comprehensive permit. And I know that Herb's in the middle of a housing project plan that would indicate the amount of affordable housing is much higher in Warren. I mean, they essentially asked, why don't you have more affordable housing, you know, as opposed to what is your plan for encouraging affordable housing in the future? So Allison, you've had a chance to take a look at it, and your thoughts
Sure.
on?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of a summary of the edits since your last version. So I did take care of those minor edits at the beginning of the document, the update the acknowledgements page, the forward, the intro, some of those recommendations you have provided, Fred.
the next, there was a couple things outside, including that one, a couple other edits to the draft plan unrelated to the state's required edits. So one being the housing needs analysis had provided some data from the Housing Authority on specifying 1 bedrooms needed. So that's been incorporated. That draft needs analysis has, further informed the comp plan. There was a significant number of comments, and these are all recommendations regarding the forestry comments. The board had been provided those last month related to there's like a urban canopy study that's going to be that's ongoing currently, right? Mapping the tree canopy. So they were a lot. So you'll notice some of those edits there are. I didn't do all of the. I went through it. Made some the ones that I thought were more relevant.
Can I address that directly?
Sure.
Because I was on the tree commission.
Okay.
Last year. And one of the things I wanted to happen was trees along Market Street, Arlington, Metacom, and Child. And we can't do anything because they're state roads. And so while there's direction from them to increase our tree canopy, particularly in low-income neighborhoods, the roads that would be most impacted, we have no control over. So I don't know how we put into our comprehensive plan that we really need DOT to get off its butt and do something about that, or give us some other mechanism like funding to put trees in front yards where it's possible to do that. But where it's most needed is, for instance, Metacom and Arlington.
So indirectly, I'll answer that in that the technical assistance that we're receiving through, it's a grant program, but we're receiving free technical assistance from the grant program from RIDEM, as well as I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's Molly Hunter. And a piece of it is looking at our ordinances, working with the tree commission and the town tree warden, also the DPW director and me, in terms of exactly that kind of stuff, how to make better complete and green streets throughout towns, including in areas that would involve RIDOT and their particular highways. It's not going to be the panacea solution to everything from that standpoint, but basically the idea is that we'll have the makings of a overall municipal canopy plan from that. So your comment is well taken, and I think that the person and the people that are providing the technical assistance are going to give us some good direction to head in. She also, as Allison has mentioned, has already taken a quick look at our particular comprehensive plan, knowing that the public hearing process is coming up, and has provided some of the feedback already that will help with the comp plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you'll see in the natural resources section some minor changes to some of the
Thank you.
actions.
So much, Cheryl.
Oh yes, so we have that.
I
That
thought
has
so,
also
too.
been incorporated. So did that address, everyone comfortable with that edit? Let's see, champion trees, some minor things.
So a general question.
Yes.
What was your reaction to the comments? When you just read it, 6 pages, single space.
Yeah.
You say, oh my goodness.
I think the most significant ones relate to the future land use map, which is really an important part of the comprehensive plan. And we did get some feedback before we received the letter in regard to the concern on the future land use map designation. And I did push back a little bit because I do know that there are other comprehensive plans that had that same approach, and that's why I had recommended it, because I've done that designation in regard to like the farm forest and open space designation on future land use map in another local community. But again, we had a different reviewer, and so how they're interpreting the state requirements for comp plans just a little differently. So they weren't comfortable with saying you can designate this on the future land use map, have this category saying we want this to be agriculture, but then not change your zoning. Like zoning and the comprehensive plan need to be consistent. So I understand the comment. We're trying to work around it. We're trying to explain ourselves out of it a little bit, just, but I think, so I took a stab at addressing that, just, added a little more comment into, about agriculture in another element, but just reverted back to the underlying zoning, rather than, having it suggest it's farm forest and open space.
So the argument is that if you're going to have agricultural land, right now, most of the agricultural land in Warren is R40. So it's, if somebody decides to sell their farm, they've got the opportunity to develop that for residential housing. And at one point, the town doubled that but put in a sunset clause and it went away. The attempt to make those agricultural lands like R80 or, so that it was like, sort of like Little Compton has done. It makes it less developable but there was a lot of pushback from the farmers here in town because they felt like even though they want to keep it as a farm, they felt that their value was being taken away from them.
Yes, the land value, your impact, I won't pretend to understand like
Yeah,
agricultural.
so that's
businesses, but like the collateral, like they may utilize that for financing of their operation.
Right. I mean, it's there was, they had a number of arguments about it, but
Or they could sell the development rights, and if the development rights go from 10 houses to 7, that's the value of those 3 houses that they lost that's being zoned away.
Right.
That would be considered a constructive taking, which might then be compensable.
And we
Well,
discussed
yeah,
that as certainly an approach that's mentioned within the comprehensive plan as a strategy that has been successful and is something that is being promoted to continue, so that is in there. But we can't.
it's just that if it's explicit in the plan, it raises red flags.
If you're explicitly down zoning, yes.
Yeah, and that's what we'd like to avoid. So that we don't. I mean, I think that
Let's see us to go with the other.
well, I know that it could come, it doesn't have to be, come through the comprehensive plan at this point, but there's a benefit to being designated flume, or is it a demand that the state wants you to say, this is
There's different ways they're not telling you how to address it, they're just saying it's inconsistent with what you're, unless you're saying you're going to change the zoning, like you said, if you're gonna require, have some type of agricultural overlay or require large lots, like changing the zoning district, but not suggesting that. Because
So
right now it's zoned residential, so.
If it's identified in the, for instance, the conservations and natural resources section, that these are agricultural lands that the town values and wishes to be retained if possible. And then the town would support the resources such as conservation easements and such to protect those lands. That would seem to fulfill the desire on the part of the town to keep the agricultural lands without running afoul of.
You're saying it's consistent in another element.
Yeah.
It may not be consistent with the current zoning, but it's consistent with our policy, like goals and policies and
certainly
other elements.
the natural resources identifies the
Yeah.
agricultural features in town to be preserved and protected where possible.
I mean, I can go back to the state with some, if the, to kind of see where we can meet in the middle, or if you don't want to go with this approach that edits the future land use map, kind of back to just expressing that as residential. And maybe the town does want to consider some type of agricultural overlay, like they did give some examples from other communities. or make that case, you know,
So what? would
add some more
agricultural
language in
overlay-
here.
What would an agricultural overlay do?
It depends on how it's crafted, you know.
And what has it done in other towns?
I'd have to look at those specific examples that they
Um,
provide.
It seems like.
In the map, LU3 dash Flume State edit.
Okay.
What? It's a state edit. What does that mean?
The name of the document.
Yeah, I mean, why is it referred to as a state edit?
I'm just trying to, yeah, I'm naming that map edit a state, meaning it's an attempt to address the states. It's really just telling me it's the most recent version that addresses the state requirements.
So does it take into account that LU4 map? The zoning conflicts or zoning consistency?
This is LU3, the future land use map.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's.
And this is
LU4.
addressing, I removed I removed that category, farm, forest, open space, that was problematic and saying, you know, the state said they wouldn't be able to approve the plan with that designation unless the town said that they would implement that through zoning measures.
If we say we're implementing zoning, are we limited to just, you know, what are we limited to in terms of the kind of zoning that we could use to protect that land? Is it just, you know, upzoning, like?
Well, so that map right there, the green areas in Teresa, those lands are already protected.
Right.
Those are already protected lands. It's,
So the beauty of all this is if someone comes in with a comp permit, it doesn't matter what you're talking about.
Yeah, we spent.
I always like to say that,
we spent
right?
2 hours on it this morning.
There's no sewage, so they don't get 12. That's.
So, but yeah, no, I'm just,
But it's
so
true.
that, but I mean, but that's sort of this juggling act that poor Allison is trying to deal with regard to the state, because you have a certain direction that the state's trying to drive in terms of affordable housing.
Right.
And it's an opportunity to literally avoid across the board, whatever you've planned and whatever your land use regulations say, as long as you as a board grant the waivers. With regard to, I think some of the stuff, again, the other side of the hand that we're juggling is that for instance, the farm open space and forest program is a voluntary program that a property owner opts to participate in.
and
So
can opt out
right.
with a penalty, but can still opt out.
Correct. You know, they can live out the 5 years or whatever it is and decide to re-up or not. And if they decide to get out earlier, there's a penalty that goes with it. But they get the benefit of having the lesser tax assessment because they're keeping it in open farm or ag space. It's, again, the difference is that when we're looking at our particular town plan and our zoning regs, we are trying to basically zone the property for certain things. The open space farm and forest program helps to carry out some of that, but it's not the mandatoriness of, say, like the zoning regulations have, because it's a participatory program that's at the option of the property owner, not something that we overlay onto a property owner from that standpoint.
Can I just ask about the map that you have up there right now? Is
Yeah.
is that what they're saying are the inconsistencies?
No, this map is a required map. We have the narrative within the land use element. So we needed to reflect this in the map.
So this is what's changing.
This is actually unrelated to the topic we're talking about
okay.
right now.
All right,
This
so
is-
that's one reason why. I was
This is, well, I shouldn't say it's unrelated, but it's, if, depending on how you want to address the farm forest and open space, if you wanted to implement zoning changes, then we would put those parcels on that second map saying, okay, this needs to be implemented. But that second map is showing the town what zoning amendments need to come after you adopt your local comprehensive plan. Those are the parcels that would need to be their zoning changed so that your zoning and your comprehensive plan are consistent. So for example, there's that one specific parcel really where you talked about changing zoning districts that the property owner had come forward during the, you know, public process. It showed on there, now it's small, but yes, you're pointing to the triangular shaped lot. So that is there. And then those other, we talked about the rural business, taking, you know, changing that zoning district, rezoning those parcels. So those are reflected on here to show you this is, you know, this is the start of the implementation of your comprehensive plan. And then those special planning districts, so the retreat overlay for the Market Street project area and the form-based code that you talk about within the plan for the
Right.
Metacom area. So this is kind of putting up the start of the roadmap for implementing your comprehensive plan.
So, to get back to the state edit map,
Your future land use map.
yeah, this one right here. Above the protected lands off Barton Avenue, there's a lot of agricultural land. And in this map, it appears as just low-density residential.
Because that's how it's zoned now.
Okay,
It's zoned that way now, and none of that land has conservation easements on it.
right. But that land, low density, I mean, R40 isn't exactly low density.
Well, that
It
did come
is.
up in one of the state comments, in regard to,
Mhm.
actually, they had an issue with medium density, right? Categorizing the medium density
Yeah.
for, you know, off Hope Street, Main Street, sorry.
Yeah,
I
because
think-
that
I
looks
think
like.
what the state's trying to say is if you're gonna target property for, to remain an open space,
Yeah.
zone it that way.
Right,
So, you know, when you look at some of these things that are low density residential or medium density residential that may have some significant property to it, especially in the Twisted area, it's low density residential basically says, well, you can do some subdivision and do low density residential. You're not protecting the open space per se. So they're saying, and basically what they're saying is try to do a better job with your stuff on, if you're serious about protecting your open space, zone it as such.
So would that be where then we would make use of something like conservation development projects, cluster development projects?
I think there are different solutions to different situations, and you know, the part that I struggle with the state is that the state's sort of trying to tell us what to do, and I want to maintain a sense of character and trait for Warren, and that you as a group with the council, you know, kind of figure out what you want to do to this, and we'll change the regulations accordingly. But I think there are some other things that we can do. There may be other programs. It's just like we talked about the voluntary property owner with the ag open space and forest program. And there may be some others, just like you've done with the green areas, which is the purchase of the.
outright purchase, yeah, that was the.
It doesn't matter what that's zoned from that standpoint, because the development rights are purchased, so it is what it is.
Right.
And so again, that's a perfect example of why just zoning something isn't necessarily the way to carry out a town vision.
Forgive me for not knowing, do we have a cluster ordinance now or not?
Have a what?
Cluster subdivisions.
Clustering is part of your zoning regs.
No one does it though.
Few people do it.
Okay, so a couple of applications have come in to Warren for it, or I just.
There's definitely some, not since I've been here, but there's definitely some development around that they've done some form of clustering and protected some open space down down here as a for instance.
Okay.
You know, there's some open space in here as a for instance, but generally speaking, the developer's going for the chunks of developable land.
And have any towns mandated cluster developments? That you do a by right plan that determines the number of units, but then you maximize the amount of land that's protected?
Generally, the clustering done in or planned residential development, as a for instance, is typically done by incentive rather than by order. So that if you decide to cluster and protect some open space, will allow you to do some extra density, so you get a
They save
couple.
on their road costs, they save on their infrastructure. I mean, there are savings.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it's been, that's just good planning, cluster development, I mean, in so many ways, and it's just.
Right. I think the
Doesn't
part
catch on.
with Warren is that you already have the bulk of your properties that have been developed. So you're sort of already in that suburban urban situation. Twisted is kind of your area that that hasn't really gone through the development yet. But again, as Fred will be always quick to point out, the water situation out there is tepid at that.
Yeah, water.
Right. And I mean, I think there's like a lot that you probably can't develop because it's going to be wetlands or, you know what I mean? And so it's like they want us to like.
Absence of water, absence of sewer.
Well, although I
And-
will point out there's decentralized sewer technologies that DEM is beginning to consider, that you could do 20 units on a sewer package that are 5,000 square foot.
Yeah, the technologies are definitely changing. Currently, the way that your wastewater district is set out, it's not your traditional where it's all user-based. Whoever has a pipe hooked up to them, they pay a certain fee, say on a quarterly basis. The interesting thing here is that you keep your sewer costs related into your tax rate. Because in the Twisted area, you're allowed, what, 2 pumps a year or something like that. And that is pumped out and treated at the wastewater facility. So it's hard to do it totally on a user-based thing. So that's why I think the town kept it in a town
And I was
tax
on
rate
that committee
related
when
thing,
that
yeah.
ordinance was written, so.
There's the light green, there's light green agricultural and then lime green recreation. And there's 2 chunks that are noted. One is in the Twisted area and then one is
That's Chase-
Birch Swamp.
That's Chase Farm. Those are both agricultural. Those both have agricultural preservation restrictions rather than being owned by conservation groups.
So is that forever?
Yes. Those
Huh.
are both forever restricted by conservation easements held by,
Is that the Souza farm, the one down in?
in Twisted, it's,
Yeah.
yeah. That was, yes, that got the landscaping stock on it.
Right. Okay, well, again.
One would
Wonder
argue
if,
that they should be folded into the conservation zone.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, so that the agricultural, I wonder, it's described within the.
Well, and
the
actually,
plan
it's
as
the-
being, maybe it needs to be changed to say like protected, within the plan, it says.
Yeah.
It explains that, but maybe on the map, the category, changing the name so it's clear, so that way it's.
Well, and it's the same conservation easement on that light green parcel with the rat tail going out to Twisted Road as the Manchester Farm. Which is between Barton and Twisted, it's the same conservation easement. They were both done in the 1980s, they're both from the same template. So there's no reason, and as well as the Chase Farm up to the north, there's no reason why the Manchester Farm, which is in dark green, either would be light green or those would be dark green as well.
And the Key Farm as well, which is
Well, the Key Farm
is
already
also being.
already
funded.
dark green, right?
So they're all.
Although that's a later conservation easement, so it's
Yeah.
slightly different template, but still it's agricultural.
So I think what, this map was built on, from your zoning, so you have this like farm conservation zoning district, so, versus an open space zoning district, so I think that's where those distinctions were made.
Right, but it doesn't make sense if it just, either Manchester and Key should be light green.
Right.
Or Chase
Okay,
and
'cause those
Souza
are-
should be dark green.
Okay, I see what you're saying, so what's the preference,
I would prefer to have just one zone that incorporates all permanently restricted and conserved agriculture and conservation lands. That would be my preference.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think
So
it,
those that show that future land use category is agricultural, those are protected and therefore just put them in the, as dark green protected open space.
And I mean, you could even do protected, agricultural / open
Yeah.
space. I think that's how it did,
Yes,
you know?
yes. And I assume the recreation category is solely town-owned lands. that
No,
are
I think
active
the,
recreation.
isn't the
Uh,
gun place, or no, that's the open space,
Well, it's, yeah, like the,
but it's.
high school, the, middle school fields, and then that
The
piece that
church,
was
Little
given
League
by,
field,
Brito,
Right.
that's on,
Yes, like, I thought the gun range was like technically privately owned
And so-
rec space sometimes, maybe
Right
it's.
there.
I don't know if you could actually call that recreation, because it's owned by the town, but it's, you know, like, for instance, the chunk that Brito gave, that's right on the Kickamilet, nothing's being done on that right now.
That doesn't mean it couldn't be used for something.
No, I
in the
know, I'm
future,
just
so-
saying, though, but it suggests that it is being used for recreation now.
Or it suggests that it's the town's goal to have it be part of a recreation program rather than an open space and agricultural preservation program. And having actually working on a project unrelated to this board, it's
Passive versus active.
passive versus active.
Yeah, I mean, because they were talking about putting in, you know,
Ball fields.
ball fields there, which makes no sense at all. That's a
Yeah, I
very
love
sensitive
these.
area for, you
Right.
know, environmentally, it would
But,
be.
but walking trails, walking.
Walking trails is fine, but not, you know, a soccer field. And then they were talking about having a car drive over there to get, you know.
Right.
Okay.
So as far as that,
Leave those are fine.
leave it as.
Well, I would say, I'd just be careful, because I know that was included in the recreation plan as.
Right. I
So I don't wanna leave that as just recreation.
well, except that I think Tara submitted it as part of her overall recreation plan. It's including the Brito as part of her purview, is that correct?
She provided quite a bit of comment. It's a number of months ago now. I'm trying to remember, and she was pretty explicit and implicit in her comments, as I recall.
Right, and Brito was part of that
Yeah.
total dialogue, so I wouldn't want
okay.
to move the Brito land out of recreation.
No, I don't wanna
Maybe-
move it out of recreation, but I wanna, modify it so that we're talking about, you know, appropriate recreation.
Well, I
Like,
think that would be the case anywhere. Well, okay, so now this opens
Not
my.
the
my-
public
So I wanna have a
School board.
timeout.
Sure.
I want to put the planning board in the timeout.
Thank you.
I want to, we've already decided with the plan, with the last changes to move forward with a public hearing.
Okay,
The only reason why I really wanted to bring this forward tonight was the state comments came in. Allison agreed to make some changes. I want to make sure that the changes that she made, you're still comfortable moving
Yes.
forward with a public hearing as is. I mean, we've made a couple changes tonight.
yeah.
But I don't want to open the door up
That's
to,
fine.
other stuff. Now, you can continue to make changes moving forward, but I just want to make sure that that there is one document, you know, that the public is going to be looking at and commenting on with regard to a public hearing, and that you're not totally changing things as
What's your,
on the slide.
What's your feeling about, I mean, for some reason, I was thinking that we were going to be doing the comprehensive plan at a different time. This Liberty Street and the comprehensive plan on the same night concerns me.
I was trying to get in, maybe scheduling a special meeting, but you guys wanted to move things so quickly and the solicitor wouldn't help me. No, I'm just-
I'll be on the phone.
Wow.
There you go.
Hey, drove the bus over Ben's body just now.
It's a public hearing, you have to be definitely in telling the public.
No, I know.
Right.
Is it possible, would it be possible to move the comprehensive plan to a different date?
I wouldn't do that. There's been already a lot of letting committees know and stuff.
How about Liberty Street? Can we do a special meeting for Liberty Street?
You,
Because the public hearing is continued, all that notice carries over with it.
Yeah.
That's why it has to be date specific, and we couldn't be iffy about it.
Sure.
Well,
Well,
now in terms of any other application that comes in.
that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, unless you agree to do a special
No.
meeting or something else, but that, that I get already. So I think your agenda is really just those two things, for whatever it is, June 20.
Well, let's do the comprehensive plan. Could we do the comprehensive plan first, since that was already on the agenda?
It's your call.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
So,
I'll drive that bus.
so how long is that gonna take, though? The public hearing on the comprehensive plan?
That's in conjunction.
You can
with the
just,
council.
you can establish a
Timeframe.
timeframe, thank you.
Which is already in our guidelines of 5 minutes per public.
Well, yeah, but would we not do a special meeting for Liberty Street? Why is that out of the question?
Because we've.
Just, you have
No, but could we
parties.
go back to the applicant and say,
It's not the applicant, it's the public.
It's the whole,
Right.
yeah, we're done.
It's the cost of notifying the, about 200 yards of butters.
but that hasn't happened yet, has
It
it?
has happened.
Yeah.
That's,
Happened.
yes, it has.
Because we're
happened in the
continuing
past.
the hearing.
Yeah, two meetings ago. And by law, we have to continue with a definite, if we're gonna continue a definite date. This way, we're not keep on sending out certified mail notifications to them and say, hey, we're doing this next.
And all those parties are gone.
Yeah,
That
we
were
can't
here.
do that.
Okay, so
No, well,
we do the comprehensive plan first. My sense is that, this has been a transparent process throughout. If somebody has something to say, they probably would have said it. I don't see it as being long.
I haven't seen a lot of people show up for any of the discussions that you've had on the comprehensive plan. At the chance that you have a full room to have that discussion, it will be easier to continue that public hearing for the comp plan than it would Liberty Street, because Liberty Street, you have a ticking clock now.
also, I think we need to control clearly, the Liberty Street opponents are trying to establish a record here.
So I wouldn't have any, there we go. Don't talk about Liberty Street right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying we need to
I
control the
would
time.
find guidance prior to the next meeting, there's things there that need to be corrected.
Okay.
She has certainly the right to say what she wants to say. However, as your legal counsel, I will give you some guidance as.
Thank you.
Good, yeah, because that was a surprise to me. I mean, that was unprecedented, really.
And she could have submitted that all in advance.
So back,
This is still.
Okay.
so back to the comprehensive plan that we're talking about, just making sure that,
Was there any other
where you're at.
areas? that
So
you wanted-
is there anything else, Allison?
The other elements, economic development comments were
I
really more
disagree.
data related. What?
If they would have read if statewide planning would have read the state seds, they would have known that I pulled everything directly from there. Word for word.
Oh, well, yes, they asked for an added goal and the set, yeah, we
And it's
referenced
actually,
the,
and all of our goals, I actually took off of, I used the seds to write it.
so hopefully we've now.
So maybe just citing that goal, so if you look up the state seds, you could say in goal, you'll actually see the specific goals that align directly with the state.
Was it, but I think it was the older they have the.
No,
newer
it's the newer
set.
version.
It was the accelerate.
Yeah, and just,
Yeah. Okay,
I work with Commerce a lot, so I had the pre-version when I wrote it, so
so you didn't agree that we needed to add goals to meet the set, okay. So,
clearly have not read the sets themselves.
so we've added and updated because time has passed, so they wanted, in some cases, just more current data, expanded data was on housing. For housing starts going back further, so housing element, that's where there was some significant added content, and that was Herb's you had reviewed that at your last meeting, but I incorporated that language into the housing element. And that medium depth clarification, I just did what the state had recommended in making the case as to why we're going to designate that medium density. And yeah, I spoke about the housing authority. So So yeah, that the housing element, economic development and land use were the focus of the state's, that last letter. Is there anything out of the added content, I can help explain further, or if you have any concerns or want to address it differently than what I did?
No, I feel like you did a good job, because I think a lot of what their feedback was really just kind of either like a rewording or citing, saying this is where it came from. It was like, exactly, it was like they had to write something.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just like a lot of it just seemed like, well, we've done this. They just wanted to see like, as in this document or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's just, I'll make those changes to the future land use map and, give that a little more thought as to how we can kind of strengthen.
Yeah.
I understand the concern. So I'll show that for the public hearing. I'll incorporate, have a clean version of this, correct? You want me to have, incorporate these edits so it's one clean version. And then anything that you haven't seen, just the future land use map, just gonna do those changes you recommended this evening, and I'll I'll show you that at the June 24th hearing.
I couldn't find it.
Okay, I'd say we're about ready for adjournment.
Yep,
Given
yep.
the fact that it's an hour and a half past my bedtime.
I will motion that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So Allison,
Yeah.
just